Appreciate that. Usually I don't get those ones. Yeah, what's going on, everybody? Yeah, let that music get you in the Christmas spirit, huh? What's going on? Happy to have you guys with us. It is Monday, the 19th of December, heading into Christmas, already in Hanukkah. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafayette_D. It's the Stokastic.com NBA Deeper Dive presented by No House Advantage. I'm joined by Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS. What have you been doing for Hanukkah? You do anything for Hanukkah? You celebrate?
Not really now. Because like growing up I did, like when I lived at home, but now it would just be a pain in the ass to go home twice. So we just do Christmas and Hanukkah at the same time.
You're one of those scoundrels that celebrates both of them?
Yep. Both of them. And then my birthday's 10 days after Christmas. So it's just me getting shit for like 10 days. It's great.
Wait, is your mom Jewish or your dad?
My dad's Jewish. My mom's not.
Okay. All right. But every year you celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah?
Yeah. Yeah. And like when I was like a kid, we would do Hanukkah when Hanukkah actually was. Now it's like I didn't even realize it was Hanukkah until I was watching the football game last night and it said Happy Hanukkah. And I was like, oh, that's now. Cool.
So would you get like Christmas present, a present every day, and then you'd get presents under a tree?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't always do the present. We didn't always do the present every day thing. Sometimes we would just do like the first day we would get it all because like every day is annoying and time consuming. But sometimes we would do it that way. But yeah, we would just do both holidays distinctly.
Okay. Well, anyway, we're happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up. Well, look at that. We're 100 likes already. What a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Yeah, and dude, we're going to get straight into basketball today too. We got, of course, because it's a basketball show, we got 9 games to talk about and like an insane amount of just value opening up, a lot of moving parts. We'll take it everywhere. All right, we'll take on all of that. But before we do, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. All of it greatly appreciated. Helps us immensely. Otherwise, we wouldn't ask you. And as you'll see in chat, atone for your sins, my friends. Atone for your sins. Help us appease the YouTube overlords here. Like I said, one thing before we jump into it. Was Jacoby Myers' play the dumbest play you've seen in since you've been watching football? I
mean, it's definitely up there. I still think the Kirk Cousins play is the dumbest individual play I've ever seen because
which one?
When he was on Washington and it was a primetime game, I think against the Eagles, and they were in the red zone with no timeouts. And instead of spiking the ball before half, he knelt and the clock ran out.
Yeah.
So like, I still think that's the dumbest one because there was no real heat of the moment. Like he got caught up and decided to throw a lateral to the other team. Like he had time to think about what he was going to do. And then he knelt. Like, so I still think that was the dumbest play I've ever seen. But when you factor in the consequences and stuff too, like the Jacoby Myers one's certainly.
Can I tell you what I think happened? I mentioned it this morning. Let me tell you what I think happened.
I don't think he knew what the score was.
Well, that's possible, but I think that it all traces back to Ramondre Stevenson being the reason that this happened. Let me explain. So Jacoby's just running down the field. He's blocking, right? He's just blocking. And then he goes, oh, they just lateraled me the football. Now, it was a chain reaction of short-circuiting their brains. Ramondre Stevenson did that. Think about it, man. If Jacoby Myers was the first person to touch that ball, he never throws it back like that. But Ramondre throws it to him, and he goes, oh, shit. Yeah, the hot potato style. I gotta fucking get rid of this thing. And then he tosses it back. I bet you if he was the first guy to touch the ball, he would have just gone down or out of bounds and ran the clock out.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, if you're in that position, too, Stevenson just turns around and laterals you the ball. There's a part of you that's going, oh shit, is it not tied?
That's like, what I'm saying.
Did I not catch the play? Like, am I about to be the asshole that just gets tackled here without pitching it?
Doesn't it make sense?
I do think it makes sense. Yeah,
it makes sense. And then Ramondre just skates off. No,
yeah, Ramondre's just walking down like, why'd you throw it to the other team, idiot?
Yeah, right. I'll tell you, I think that's what happened. But anyway. Let's get into some basketball here. 9 games. Dude, what a wild slate. This has a lot going on.
Yeah, and there's still stuff we're waiting on too that could just make it crazier.
Yeah, old school swag, Kyle. That's right. Got the old Awesemo hoodie on. I tell you, this thing is comfortable, very comfortable. But by the next time I wash it, there won't be any logo left,
Right.
but it'll still be comfortable. Let's dive straight into this one. Utah at Cleveland. And one last thing, how many of these games, I'm not asking for like an exact scientific answer here. I know you haven't like looked through it and be like, oh, that game. Like how many of these games, just given how many of the other spots make for really, really friendly fantasy environments, how many of these games are you looking at and just going kind of like, I don't have much from this at all?
Well, that's kind of the crazy thing about the slate to me. There's not that many games where I feel that way because I think most games have at least like one or two plays that I really like. And so far, at least, there actually isn't a game. I mean, the Lakers, I guess, to some extent, but there isn't a game that I've like gone through yet where I'm just like, oh, I like, 14 plays from this team. So it's kind of weird where like there's just a lot of really good plays that I like, but they're not all concentrated to the same team.
All right, let's make it happen. Jazz 6.5-point favorites here at Cleveland, 220 total. I mean, we got like 240-point totals tonight coming up once we get to the end of this show. So we'll be sure to spend as much time as possible on some of those games. But no Colin Sexton, no Kelly Olynyk. Let's start with the Utah Jazz here. I said favorites, but 6.5-point dogs going into Cleveland against a clearly very good defensive team. One of the lower totals on this slate. Is Utah one of those teams, though, where you look at them and you go, there are still some pieces that I'd like to get to today?
No, not particularly.
Okay.
Utah is one of the quicker write-offs for me on this slate for a couple of reasons. One, like you said, it's an unappealing matchup against Cleveland, but then also they're in the first game of the night. So there's a very good chance that we are still going to be waiting on some injury news later on. And if you have marginal plays locked in from this Utah team, it's just going to reduce your flexibility. So that's not something that I can, as a 150 max player, that's not something that I really can do anything about. But I do think if you're single entering or, just building lineups by hand, I would say as a tiebreaker, go with like the non-first game of the night pieces if you think it's close. But even beyond, that the strategy component there, it's just not a very appealing spot because of the matchup against Cleveland and because Utah is relatively healthy. You're missing Kelly Olynyk here, but that's not a huge difference maker because he's not a really high usage guy. My assumption is that you're going to get Malik Beasley moving into the starting lineup. He's priced up to 5,700. So even if you give him like 32 minutes or so, he's not going to look that good. You could potentially get some value here. Like if we get Rudy Gay starting instead of Malik Beasley, or you get Horton Tucker starting in place of Beasley, then sure, you have a couple of really cheap players there that would project well. But assuming that Beasley's going to just move into the starting lineup and you're going to continue to get backup minutes from Gay and then, Fontecchio and maybe Horton Tucker getting some backup minutes, but not enough to matter, you're just not really getting anything that moves the needle for this team, even with Olynyk being out. Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, Mike Conley, they're all reasonably priced, but just not, they don't stand out at all to me here. And I don't think Olynyk really affects the front court minutes too much because we've seen Jared Vanderbilt and Walker Kessler essentially splitting 48 minutes. We haven't been getting much of, the lineups where Kelly Olynyk is at the 5 with Beasley and Markkanen on the floor together. So I don't really think it's a situation where you're getting more minutes for Vanderbilt or Kessler because I still just think they're going to split 48. I don't think they're going to play alongside each other much, if at all. So really just not much that I like from this team at all.
On the other side, let me see here. We got, 17 minutes ago, we had an ownership update. 3 free days, by the way, guys. Everything, all of our NBA tools, entirely free. Ownership, player projections, boom bust tool, the new lineup generator, which is sick. We have player swaps in there now. You can export the CSV, all that stuff totally free. Unlike football, where you do this on a Monday, you're like, oh, I get one day, and then Tuesday and Wednesday, I get nothing. You're getting Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday entirely free. And you got games on every one of those days. So take advantage of it. No strings attached. We'll gladly refund your misery if you hate it, which would be exactly $0 since it's free. But yeah, check out all the tools, 3 free days. Check out the lineup. See if you like it. I think you will. But yeah, links in the description. Jordan can throw that in the chat as well. So essentially any matchup for Cleveland is a pace up spot, Adam. Like they played at the slowest pace in the league. But Houston's bottom 6 defense as far as defensive rating goes. They play
Utah.
at a top. What's that?
You mean Utah?
What did I say? Phoenix?
Houston.
That's odd. Utah is a bottom six. It's you know why? Because Houston is slightly worse than them. I was looking at Utah slightly bottom six defense, play at a top 10 pace. This isn't a Cleveland team that's getting a lot of ownership right now, but you've got guys like Garland, Mobley, Mitchell pulling a little bit. Do you like this spot for them today?
Yeah, I do. I think this is certainly the more appealing side of this game. I wouldn't say that there's one guy that stands out as a great option, but I think essentially the entire starting lineup, with the exception of what I expect to be Isaac Okoro, looks really good. So Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, all look like good options. Mobley, Garland, Mitchell, all pulling 11 to 12% ownership on DraftKings. Allen pulling 7%. But I've said it several times recently, Jared Allen is playing huge minutes right now for this team. So I still think in tournaments he makes some sense, but the fact that he is center only just makes it a little bit more difficult to get to him. But, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, both average around 36 minutes per game as well. Garland about a 1 fantasy point per minute guy, Mitchell approaching 1.2. Mobley's better when Allen is out, but you should still get 34, 35 minutes from him at 6,900. So all of those guys look good. If you want to gamble on Kevin Love or Karis LeVert, I think that's okay, just given how cheap they are. But they are guys that I just think with all of the other stuff we're going to be able to get to on this slate aren't all that appealing.
All right, you want to move on then? Talk a little Toronto, Philly here?
Yep.
All right, so Toronto 7-point dogs, 219.5 total. We're getting through some of these lesser appealing games first. It's going to be, we'll start the cruise once we get into some of these interesting ones for sure. But on the Toronto side, still waiting on news for OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. Do you have a read on that?
I don't.
Okay. I wouldn't think so, but got to ask anyway. Let's just assume that both of them are active today. What does that do for the rest of this Toronto team? Like, I think Siakam's always viable, right? Even though he's expensive, he's going to play a ton of minutes. We know Nick Nurse doesn't pull any punches, but it doesn't look great besides that.
Yeah. So the status of Anunoby and Trent matters more so for guys like Juancho Hernangomez and potentially Malachi Flynn than it does for anything else, because neither of them are super high usage guys. Pascal Siakam is going to get his one way or the other. Power forward center on both DraftKings and FanDuel. He looks good on DraftKings. You can expect to get a lot of minutes from him and potentially a couple more minutes if Trent and Anunoby are out. But on FanDuel at 9,400, Siakam looks great. 10-1 on DraftKings, still a pretty solid option. Barnes, Van Vliet, both certainly playable, just given how many minutes they're going to play. But I do think prices have pretty much corrected there. So Siakam is the piece that I'm really interested in if you do get Trent and Anunoby in. If they are out, I expect that you'll get Koloko in the starting lineup again, just to give them some more size against the Philly front court. But we did get Malachi Flynn starting the second half last game. He's played 20-plus minutes in back-to-back games now. So at 3,100, I do think that's a reasonable spot to gamble if Trent and Anunoby are both out. Similarly, a $3,700 Hernangomez, who played 40 minutes 2 games ago, was on pace to play about 28 last game. He's a decent value option if they're both out as well. But assuming they're in, Siakam's the only guy that looks like any sort of a priority.
All right. Lance Simpson, Laffy, have you been to an AA meeting with that refund your misery line? It's exactly, that's exactly where I got it. It's a great line. But yes, I stole it. I stole it from the rooms, Lance. All right. Let's talk about, well, actually, is there anything else you want to hit on just from like an injury perspective? I think you covered all of our bases with Toronto, right? I don't think we need to dig more into that.
Yep.
With Philly, James Harden, Joel Embiid, still no Tyrese Maxey. You've got Tobias Harris, though. I mean, once you get down a little bit further, I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about. This team, believe it or not, for the first time in a long side outside of Maxey, is actually pretty healthy. But you're paying a premium on Embiid against Toronto, and James Harden's $9,900. I don't want to say you can, get to anybody on this slate, but you have Luka, you have Giannis, Embiid, no Anthony Davis, of course. LeBron James was also ruled out. You have Lillard, Trey. There's Zion, Pascal Siakam. Just naming guys north of 10K, and even in that 9K range, you have SGA against Portland with no Giddey. Like, how do you prioritize Philly? I'm not saying you can't, but are there any spots here that you look at and you go, you know what? Of all of these top tier guys, and we can get to them tonight, I really like Philly. Is that?
I mean, Harden and Embiid are the only two that stand out, but then you run into the issue that you were just describing. I really like James Harden at 9,900. The problem is I also really like, I mean, I like Siakam on the other side of this game. I really like Zion, as you mentioned. There's plenty of guys in this range that are going to look really good, potentially, or Trey Young one way or the other, but, potentially playing without DeJounte Murray. Plenty of guys in this price range to get to. Similarly, you have Embiid at center, where if you get there, great, but we already know that Anthony Davis is out for the Lakers, so you have a cheap Thomas Bryant at center. Rudy Gobert is questionable for Minnesota, so you potentially have a cheap Naz Reid again. You have plenty of mid-range centers as well. So they're both guys that look good, but they're still only pulling 10 to 12% ownership just because there are other options. It becomes that situation where it's very easy to sit here and say, like, oh, I like James Harden. But if I'm going to say, like, oh, I just want to be jamming in James Harden, that means that I'm giving up Zion, or I'm giving up Siakam, or I'm giving up these other players that look very similar. So I think they are both good plays. I think I get to Harden more than I get to Embiid because of the salary and a little bit more positional flexibility. But still, I think that 10 to 15% ownership makes sense. Beyond them, though, I really have nothing from this team. It doesn't strike me as a slate where I'm really going to be getting to Tobias Harris or DeAnthony Melton, and I don't really see the need to be taking shots on bench guys from the Sixers.
Okay, yeah, that's where I thought you'd be going with this one. It makes sense. Let's talk about Orlando and Atlanta then. If you think we're moving quickly through these games, don't worry. We'll definitely get into the weeds with a couple of these coming up. But Orlando, and then we can get to the Atlanta side. Collins is back. We'll talk about the DeJounte Murray pending issue there. But with the Orlando Magic today, is Banchero at a mid 7K price point viable?
Banchero actually looks good to me here, and that scares me because I'm not sure that I've actually gotten him on a day that he does well all season long. But this is a pretty appealing game, and obviously Atlanta is a 7-point favorite. So there is some blowout risk here, but it's nothing crazy. I'm not going to, be too concerned with that. You're typically getting around 34 minutes from Banchero. In the games that he's played with Franz Wagner this year, he has a 28.5% usage rate, double-digit rebounding percentage, 18% assist percentage. He's just a high upside option coming in at 7,700. He looks good to me on DraftKings. He's pulling 11% ownership. The other spot that's getting ownership is Markelle Fultz, pulling 11% as well, 5,100. I think he's a reasonable play also. He is pretty cheap. It is an appealing game. He's averaged about 0.92 DraftKings points per minute so far this year, but since the start of last year, he's closer to 1.2. I think you see him settle in around the fantasy point per minute, given that now, he is playing with Banchero, who clearly wasn't there last year. But you should see around 30 minutes in games where Fultz is able to avoid foul trouble and or injuries. So I think that he looks like a decent point per minute projection. One guy that I think is going a little bit overlooked is Mo Wagner. He's only pulling 2% ownership at $5,700. We've seen him continue to just hold off Mo Bamba in this rotation, and Bamba's just basically been Mo Wagner's backup. Wagner's close to a fantasy point per minute guy, playing 29, 30 minutes in competitive games. I don't think he's a priority. I don't think he's somebody that I'm going to be playing a lot of, but I do think he's somebody just going a little bit under-owned. For example, in the boom bust tool right now, we have him getting 1.5% ownership with a 4% chance of being optimal. So just stands out as an option where, if you've built a lineup where you have a bunch of good chalk pieces that project really well, I think Wagner's a good piece to fit in as a lower owned guy.
What about with Atlanta, where, of course, we're still waiting on some situations? Like, we know Capella's out. We know Collins is going to play. But you had actually just mentioned it a second ago. The DeJounte Murray news, is pretty significant. Plus, I mean, you're in a very good matchup against this Orlando Magic team that you really have, you're not expecting a whole lot of resistance from them today. If let's say that DeJounte Murray is, because we know if he plays, you're getting Trey Young at 10-3, we can talk about that. But if DeJounte Murray ends up sitting again, how does that affect Trey Young in context to the rest of the slate where he's sitting at 10-3 on DraftKings? And so by the way, DeJounte Murray did participate in shoot around.
Yeah, so that's good to know. I know Collins is expected to play, but that makes me think that Murray's likely to as well.
Collins doesn't even have an injury designation.
Oh, okay. I hadn't updated the most recent injury report, but it's interesting in the 4 games that Young's played without DeJounte Murray, he's pretty much sucked. He has like a 33% usage rate, which is actually a little bit lower than the games where he's played with Murray. He's averaged 1.23 DraftKings points per minute, which is lower than the 1.33 he's played in the games with Murray. I do think that if you were to get a larger sample where DeJounte Murray is out, you would see Trey Young produce at a higher rate. So I still think Murray being out is a benefit for him, but I don't think that Murray being back is necessarily just like kills Young's value. He's not going to project quite as well if Murray is back, but you still get that tournament upside for him. And with the way DFS works, it's everybody that's been going to Trey Young and getting burned with Murray out will stay away and he'll go nuts here. But I still think he's an interesting tournament play. I do prefer James Harden. I do prefer Zion. I do prefer Siakam in this price range. But the ownership should be pretty low if Murray is out. And so I do think that there is still some merit to getting there. Right now, we have him projected for about 6% ownership with Murray projected to be in.
Riled up chat with that Orlando take. I wasn't saying they can't win. I'm saying that it's not the most difficult matchup. I know they're playing a little bit better lately, but this still, I mean, it's not the most star-studded lineup. But we'll see. We'll see. Besides the fact, did you mention if Murray plays? I was reading chat there. If Murray plays, if you have interest in him,
in Murray himself,
yeah,
not really. 8,800. I mean, it's not the worst price tag on him. The problem is just that there are so many good plays on this slate that I don't think I'd be getting to a lot of him.
Anything else for Atlanta then?
Onyeka Okongwu, sort of interesting. He burned pretty much everybody last slate, and I said the next day that I kind of realized I had gone too high on his projection like 2 minutes into the slate. I hadn't cut his rates enough for Trey Young, but you're still likely to get 28 to 30 minutes from Okongwu at 5,200. He's pulling 11% ownership. I think as long as the ownership stays down there, he does still look like a reasonable option, but the interest level in him is still going to be impacted by injury news that we get later because, again, we already have Thomas Bryant playing without Anthony Davis, though you do have Wenyen Gabriel back, which adds some risk to Bryant. But if Gobert is out, you get Naz Reid again.
If Naz Reid plays, he's probable. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You have Embiid on the slate. You have Jared Allen. Like you have a pretty solid slate at center, and Okongwu is getting more expensive. So I don't think he's somebody that you're just jamming in again. He was 60% owned last slate. I wouldn't expect anything close to that, but he does still look like a reasonable point per dollar option. Bogdan Bogdanovic also, I assume if DeJounte Murray is in, that Bogdanovic goes back to the bench, and I would expect him to play around 30 minutes, which is going to make him not very interesting at 6,500. If Murray is out, you probably get Bogdanovic still in the starting lineup and playing, 32 to 34. So he'd be a little bit more interesting, but that price tag is rising as well.
All right. Yeah, I mean, if Rudy Gobert sits, because just looking at where we've got everybody projected right now, I mean, we've got Thomas Bryant getting, for a 9-game slate, just insane ownership. Like this is Andre Drummond, $3,500 type of ownership that we see in the past, 65% right now.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like I get it, but I don't know. We've had some really interesting slates lately, and I talked about it with somebody on a show the other day, but it kind of made me think about what you've talked about when we get value centers, how typically they just end up being plays you really like because rebounding's more stable and they're better point per minute guys. So you can trust them a little bit more. But the flip side to that is when you get this massive ownership coming in, especially when it ends up being to more than one center, like on DraftKings, it's one thing to say, well, Thomas Bryant's going to be really popular. And then you can just play, a bunch of other centers in the utility spot. But like we've had these slates recently where the other day, it was, I think, yesterday, Naz Reid and Thomas Bryant just taking up like every spot. And the other day it was Okongwu and somebody taking up like every spot. So it creates a situation where you just get completely unowned, Jokic or Embiid or whoever, like anybody else at the position. And it becomes really interesting because even if those centers end up being good point per dollar plays, there's a real chance that you just can't win without a center that somebody that goes for 60 plus points. So it creates a really interesting situation with all the ownership going in there. But like Bryant does deserve a lot of ownership for sure. But it also makes it so like Okongwu is an interesting pivot there, getting 1/6 of the ownership for only $1,000 more.
Well, it to your point though as well, it's not just like some of the expensive guys, right? Embiid, Sabonis with center only eligibility against the Charlotte Hornets today in a game with a 240 total. Like, of course, he's still going to be popular, but to your, like what you're saying, if Gobert is out, then how many lineups are going to have just like starting with Naz Reid and Thomas Bryant?
Right. Like that's kind of what I'm saying is the first lineups you build in terms of projection are just going, if for the sake of this conversation, if Gobert is out, you're just going to be starting with like Reid plus Bryant so often. And so many people are going to be doing that. So there's appeal in going to a much lower owned Okongwu in that situation, just hoping that he beats, one or both of those guys, but also in just going other places. Like you have Joval at 5,100. You have Şengün at 6K. You have maybe Nurkic against OKC. You have Christian Wood in the spot against Minnesota, who may be playing without Dwight Powell. You have Embiid. You have whoever's playing center for Phoenix. So like there's just so many good plays on this slate to get to where I do think it just makes for a really interesting conversation where you potentially have two of the two best point per dollar values blocking you out from all these other really high upside plays.
Would you suggest setting any type of exposure limits to that? Like if you're crunching, because otherwise you're going to get, unless you have like an advanced sorting system, you're going to get a ton of them in the same lineup. And you're not
right. I mean, I guess that's kind of what I was going to say was I wouldn't because I don't need to.
But a lot of people don't have that capability.
Right. Yeah. It kind of just like you should figure out a way to build lineups that you do have that capability. But yeah, like you want something when you're building lineups anyway, whether it's using randomness, whether it's using exposure caps, you want some sort of way to not just have the best projected players getting into every single lineup because, you do want some sort of volatility there. But yeah, so I would recommend having some way of doing that. There's multiple ways that you can.
What's a way that you can?
I mean, like randomness, obviously, the more randomness you use, the more random your lineups are going to be. If you just use exposure caps, whether that's using like optimal percentage times 1.1 or something, there's ways you can do it that way. It's really just something where you want to figure out, you want to spend time like in Fantasy Cruncher building lineups and figure out how to get Fantasy Cruncher to give you what you want. So it's hard to just say like, oh yeah, do this, it'll work, because it may not work for what you're trying to do. I have my way of doing it that may not work for everybody else based on other things that go into how I build lineups. But exposure caps and randomness are the two easiest ways to make it so that you're at least getting lineups to choose from that don't all look the same.
I think that's helpful for people though, like taking the optimal lineup percentage, even would you say times 1.1 or something?
Yeah, like just that. Something. So because you don't want to be too restrictive in Fantasy Cruncher. Like you don't want to say like, oh, I'm going to cap it at optimal percentage, and so then you're forcing Fantasy Cruncher to just like give you these 2% owned guys like relatively frequently.
Right. Let's talk about Portland. On its face right now, in the assumption that a lot of these guys, that all these guys play, they don't look great. But Nurkic is out because he was probable, downgraded to questionable. Usually when a player gets probable, downgraded to questionable, there's a decent chance that they're not going to be on the court that night. And then you have Jeremy Grant also questionable. So, I mean, right now we have these guys ruled in, but this team looks quite a bit different in the event that they're out.
Yeah, and it potentially opens up more value. Yusuf Nurkic, like you said, downgraded to questionable today. That's not really what you like to see. And if he's out, you're probably going to get a $3,300 Drew Eubanks starting in his place, giving us another very, very cheap center that's going to project as a good point per dollar value. If Nurkic is in, he looks like a high upside option against an Oklahoma City front court that has basically nobody that is likely to slow him down. To me, the biggest risk for Nurkic if he's in is, what if Portland closes small? So like if Grant and Nurkic are in, this OKC team is a spot where it wouldn't be surprising at all if you see Winslow in the closing lineup over Nurkic. But at the same time, if Nurkic is just torching this front court, Portland doesn't have to close small. You could still very easily get those minutes for Nurkic. But I think he should have a lot of success if he's in. If he's out, then Drew Eubanks is going to project as a good point per dollar value, should play mid to upper 20s in minutes. Similarly for Jeremy Grant, if he's in at 7,200, I'm not that interested compared to other plays on the slate. But if he's out, you should get Justice Winslow starting again. He's $3,600 with small forward, power forward eligibility. He would end up looking like a good value at a position where there's not the same level of opportunity cost that you have at center.
Dude, if we start getting news before lock, and you got live before lock coming up after this, so definitely don't go anywhere. Greg Ehrenberg, Eric Lindquist, they're taking you up till 7 p.m. tip. If some of this news does roll in and these players are out, whether it's Nurkic, Grant, whether it's Rudy Gobert, and a few others that are pending, you could be looking at like an extreme stars and scrubs type of slate.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot to pay up for, especially in that like 10K range. You have Giannis and Luka today as well, but that 10K range that we just keep talking about, there's so many good plays in there.
All right. So on the other side then, and of course, if news comes in, we'll come back and we can break some of this stuff down. So Pokusevski, a lot of ownership right now. Power forward, center eligibility.
Oh, perfect timing.
What
Shea
do we get?
Gilgeous-Alexander available to play.
Okay. Well, let's start with him then.
Play a lot of him.
Yeah, you would think so. Now, I believe we had him originally projected because we had him at 0.1% ownership in this spot. So I'm assuming we'll get an update there. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at an OKC team right now. He's just been, I think, you've made a great point about this all year that he was really underpriced for a lot of the season. And I don't know if it was that people just didn't trust that he could continue to produce at this clip, but he has. You have no Josh Giddey. And you're talking about a guy in SGA who has been like, is he giving you the 70-point games every 3 games? No, but he's still, a 33% usage guy, almost a 30% assist guy. You're going to get him out there for good minutes every single game. This against Portland is a very interesting spot now that we know he's going to play.
Yeah, and Giddey being out's a pretty big deal. If you go back, he's played 3 total games without Giddey this season, been great. But even if you go back to last season, in the games where Josh Giddey's been active, Gilgeous-Alexander's averaged 1.25 DraftKings points per minute, 30.8% usage rate, 28% assist percentage. In 18 games without Giddey, he goes from 1.25 DraftKings points per minute to 1.5. Usage rate jumps like 4 points to 34.7. Assist percentage jumps to 35.5%. Overall this year without Giddey on the floor, SGA's played 434 minutes, 1.61 DraftKings points per minute with a 39.5% usage rate and a 35.8% assist percentage. Even if you balance those numbers out, those rates out a little bit, you're just going to get a really, really high projection on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander here, playing without Giddey and without many other pieces of this team. I assume he's playing his full 35 minutes since he is playing in this game. He, to me, is actually the guy that I like the most right now in this 10K range.
I like him a lot too. Yeah. And you're getting him sub 10K. We could talk about Pokusevski and Omarui. That's a tough one to pronounce.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. Every time I see it, it doesn't flow right. But OKC is one of those teams today on a 9-gamer that's pretty popular. We started with SGA, but Pokusevski is the one that's really getting a lot of love today at a low 4K price point.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens with this ownership between now and lock because I don't like this team that much. They have 10 bodies now. And when I had talked about them this morning, SGA was listed as out. And so it looked like they were going to only have 9 bodies because they have Trey Mann in the G League and they have Jalen Williams, the big, in the G League. So it looked like they were only going to have 9 bodies. But now they have 10. And the one consistent thing we've seen all season long from OKC is that they typically are going to run these really deep rotations. And it's not very difficult to map out the minutes in a way where nobody plays more than 30 except for SGA, and everything seems very reasonable. Like, could you get more than 24 minutes for Isaiah Joe or Pokusevski or Kenrich Williams? Sure, but I'm hesitant to project more than that just because of how they typically run their rotations. If you go to 24 minutes on Isaiah Joe and Pokusevski, they look like pretty good point per dollar values, but they don't look like guys that I want to play at 30% owned in the case of Poku, 10% for Isaiah Joe, a little bit more interesting. Similarly, Omarori pulling 25% ownership. I don't really get that one at all. He started last game. He played 16 minutes. I'm not expecting him to start today. If he does, I'll give him a few more minutes. But for right now, I have him at 20 minutes, and it still just doesn't make him look that good, especially at that ownership. Jalen Williams and Lou Dort, I expect to play around 30 minutes, but they're both pretty reasonably priced because you can't give them the same sort of usage bump with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander playing as you would have when we talked about it this morning with SGA and Giddey both out. I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of options here that look like reasonable point per dollar plays, but with SGA in, I don't like them nearly as much as the field is projected to right now. I'll be more interested if you see this ownership, come back down to like 10 to 15% on guys like Poku, but right now I don't really get it.
Well, we did have SGA out because he was out, and like you said, then he got upgraded to questionable. Usually that means they're gonna play.
Yeah, but I mean, we like right now we have SGA projected for 49.8 or 49.8 DraftKings points. So we have him projected in. I don't know that I don't think we had him in for ownership.
That's what I think it is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just looking at ownership.
So like that, I do think you'll see it come down, but if it doesn't, like, I'll just gladly, like, I'll lose if OKC goes nuts tonight.
All right, so Pokusevski came down to 18.
Okay, that's a lot.
Ruiz at like 4 now. Yeah, okay, so this makes a whole lot more sense. We still only have SJ at 6.
I mean that's going to change, I think, but
right.
If he doesn't, I just assume the dude's going to be in like a lot of my stuff.
I don't think he'll be wildly on there, just given how many good options there are, right?
So that's kind of the thing. Right now we have him, like I said, we have him at 49.8 DraftKings points. At that projection, I get why he's getting like 6% ownership, because he does just look comparable to a lot of other guys. I'm several points higher, so I'm going to have an easier time getting to him. That said, I'm also higher on Zion than we are, so that'll balance it out some. But yeah, I do think that'll have an impact too, is like, where does his final projection end up coming in? And because that's going to influence ownership. And, if he does end up being projected for 49, 50 points, certainly going to be lower owned than if he gets to my 52 or 53.
So Gary Trent was just ruled out, and OG is a game time decision.
Yeah, so with Trent out, I assume you're going to get Hernangomez starting again. Reasonable value, not anything I want to go crazy with, though. Not a good point per minute guy. Not going to be asked to do a lot when he's on the floor, but I assume he's going to start and play around 30 minutes. If Anunoby is out, then you should get Koloko as well. You could also just get Koloko instead of Hernangomez. So we still kind of need to wait and see what the starting lineup is.
Okay. Let's talk about Milwaukee and the New Orleans Pelicans. Before we do, though, our sponsor, No House Advantage. I don't know if you guys have checked them out yet, but if you are big on taking advantage of, well, I don't think it's fair to say free money, but if you're, relatively competent at this, a really good chance to make more money and more consistent money than you would anywhere else, because these contests overlay like crazy. Right now we're at, what are we filled at? 37% filled on that. What's NBA at? 17% filled, still 10K up top. Every week, every day, they're still giving out like $10,000, $15,000 up top. It's pretty awesome. And they're overlay, and it's a sick format. You're just picking players that you like, except when you're building these lineups and you're playing against the field anywhere else, all you're doing is doing props instead. So the ones you like the most, they go at the top, they get the most points. The ones you're least confident in go at the bottom, they get the fewest points. You're building lineups that way. And the greatest part is that we have all of the tools for free that Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, built for No House Advantage. Over at Stokastic.com, the tools are free. You're talking about the optimal lineup, the tool, the player prop projections tool, all of that at your disposal for NHA. If you use the link in the description or the one that Jordan just threw in the chat, you're getting that to a $50 first match deposit bonus. Very cool format. Massive overlay all the time over here. Like, it's just one of those things where people go, yeah, man, it's hard to win a DFS. You can't win a DFS. Well, then you're not playing at the right spots. Like, if you're not playing at No House Advantage and trying to take full opportunity for all of the overlay, you're just simply not doing it the right way. So check it out, nohouseadvantage.com. And you can play against the house there, which I know has become a big hit recently. If you hit all your picks, 21x your entry. So a lot of different formats there, whether you're playing against the house or you're playing against the field, with a bunch of overlay in those contests. It's right there. Links in the description. Link is in chat. Get your $50 first match deposit bonus and use all of our free tools that are at your disposal to win some money there. All right, let's talk about the next one up. Fun game for sure here, Adam. We got Milwaukee and you got the New Orleans Pelicans. Let me see. Has the line moved on this at all? I assume it's still where it was. Yeah, Bucks are 1-point dogs here. No Chris Middleton. I wonder if this is more serious than they initially let on. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I hope it isn't.
Yeah, I don't know. It's irrelevant, right? Like, we're not going to waste time on it. But how much Giannis do you get to at this exorbitant price point today?
Probably not a lot. He's pulling 6% ownership, 6% chance of being optimal. That makes sense to me. Obviously there's the value to get there if you want to, but a lot of the value is, going to be at center, but also it just goes back to the same issue that we've had getting to Giannis, getting to Luka on recent slates, but especially Giannis because he doesn't play as many minutes as Luka, so he doesn't project quite as well. It's just, you can build a lineup that looks pretty good with Giannis, But frequently you're going to be able to say like, okay, well, what if I turn Giannis into Zion or Siakam or, SGA, depending on what positions you have available, and upgrade your, you know, Pokashevsky or Omarui or whoever to somebody better. You're just going to get a lot of lineups, I think, that look better doing that. So I'm probably going to have the same issue getting to him today that I normally do, where there's just enough guys that are capable of going for 60 plus in the 10K range that it's going to keep me out of the 12K plus range a lot. And then also Luka being on this slate and projecting better than Giannis is going to help with that as well.
Quick Google search to spell that one, Jordan.
Exorbitant.
There's no like red line underneath it, so I was like, oh, this might be the right word.
They just fired. All right, I like it. Problem solving. If you're not going to Giannis, are you going to anyone? You had a great call the other week when we were doing this show on Drew, just talking about like, yeah, he's still mid-range price point. His salary didn't come down all that much, even with Middleton returning. And he ended up being great that day, but he's at 8,600 now. Bobby Portis is at 7K. All these guys are priced, I would say, pretty appropriately. Yeah,
Holiday just kind of looks like a neutral play to me. He can show up in a lineup here or there just as a contrarian piece, last guy in, but he's not at a price point anymore where I'm looking at it and saying like, I think people are making a mistake not getting here. I completely understand why he's 1 to 2% owned. You just have so many guard plays that you can get to today. But, still plenty of upside for him. He's averaged 1.2 DraftKings points per minute without Middleton and with Giannis this year. He should play 34, 35 minutes. So, like, I think Drew looks good. It's just there's a lot of guys that look better.
How do you feel about the New Orleans Pelicans then on the other side? Like, this game is great from a viewer perspective, from a DFS perspective. It's not getting a ton of love right now outside of some Joval at 5,100. Besides that, though, like, even with Ingram still out of this lineup, you got Zion at 4%, 5%, McCollum at 3%. Any love for some of these big guns for New Orleans tonight?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to be heavier on this team, and I'm scared because like it's not a great matchup against the Pels or against the Bucks, but without Ingram on the floor overall this year, Zion's averaged 1.37 DraftKings points per minute. He has a 30.9% usage rate, 12% assist percentage, 25.5% rebounding percentage. Those numbers hold up too if you just look at it by game in the games that he's played without Ingram and with McCollum and with Joval, still averaging about 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. He's also playing more minutes recently. He played 39 minutes last game. He's now averaged 35.5 minutes per game in the 10 games that he's played without Ingram and with McCollum and Joval. I'm just higher on him than the industry, it appears. I'm higher on him than the prop market. I fired pretty much every possible prop that I could on Zion today, which, again, I've done that in other spots and it hasn't gone well for me, so no guarantee. But I think he looks better here than pretty much anybody else has him looking. And so I think I'm going to get to a lot of them, especially at that ownership. One thing that could also work in his favor here is with Larry Nance out. We've had 2 games this year where Nance was out. Joval played 30 minutes in the first one. Joval played 20 minutes in the second one, and they closed with Zion at the 5. If you get him out there without Joval, he's going to rebound at a higher rate. And so I think that's another thing that benefits him here at 10-2. So I like him quite a bit. Joval looks good. I gave him 25 minutes because, again, he could play 30, he could play 20. I don't really know. I went to 25. Normally I go to 23. So Nance being out got him a couple of extra minutes. We know he's a really good point per dollar guy. He's $5,100. And he's only getting 12% ownership. So I like getting there. Really hurting Gomez. I saw people mention it in chat. He played 16 minutes in the last game where Nance was out. I expect him to be the backup center here. If you get foul trouble for Joval, you could certainly get more playing time for Hernangomez, but I think 16 is a pretty reasonable projection that puts him in line for 19 to 20 DraftKings points at 3K flat. On a lot of slates, he would be somebody that you really wanted to get to, but here you do have other value centers, so that's why he's not getting much ownership, but he does project as a good point per dollar, contrarian option, so some interest there. I wouldn't play him in the same lineups with Joval because the true ceiling for Billy Hernangomez is if Valanciunas gets in foul trouble or gets hurt. The final piece that I think has some merit here is McCollum. He's pulling 3% ownership. I don't like him that much. He's 7,400. He's been about a fantasy point per minute guy. Should play about 35 minutes. So, projects for around 5x. But Zion in particular, I think is probably going to be one of my biggest tournament stands tonight. And then Joval and Hernangomez are both, pretty interesting tournament options as well.
You got that legal sports betting in Maryland now.
Yeah.
Nice. Took a while, but we're
Yeah,
here.
it took like 2 years for them to roll it out.
I know. But you know what's cool? They didn't just roll it out in some nonsensical way like other states. Like Rhode Island has, and I don't live there, but I know they have like one sport. It's like a Rhode Island sports book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, Maryland did it right as far as like once they rolled it out, you could just immediately get on
That's what I
everywhere
mean.
and bet.
With
They
huge
took their
promos
sweet ass time
everywhere on
doing
all
it.
those books too.
What'd you say?
With huge promos on a lot
Yeah.
of those books for Maryland. Yeah. We got the link.
Yeah, I
for
still need to take advantage of the BetMGM one because there was some issue with like creating my account and I haven't been able to do it yet. But yeah, I think I made like $4,000 off the FanDuel one.
Yeah.
Because it was just like a 100% deposit bonus up to 10K and 100% deposit bonus in free bets, and I made
You're taking
4K
advantage
almost.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
BetMGM's a $1,000 risk-free bet.
Yeah.
But if you use our link, guess what? You get 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum. That's $240 value, baby. All you got to do is use the link, deposit $10, put it on any game. If that bet wins, you get paid out and you get your 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum. All of our tools, not just for basketball, for every single sport. If it loses, you get all the money back in free bets and you get 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum anyway. So it's not either or, it's both. It's fantastic. And if you got more money, if you're like, oh, I got more than $10, I'm going to throw down. You put $100 bet down and your first bet loses, you get it all back in free bets. But no matter what happens on that bet, if you use that link, the 2 months, including our premium Discord, all of our tools, every sport, everything on the site, not Fantasy Cruncher. We don't own Fantasy Cruncher, but we got the lineup generator. All that's free for the first 2 months. So check it out. You're trying to get in on the action. We got you. All right, let's talk about Dallas here. I want to move through this kind of quick because we still got to get to these other games and we're running a little short on time. So let me just turn it over to you. What do you want to do with the Dallas Mavericks today? And are we waiting on? We're waiting on Tim Hardaway right now.
Yeah, we're waiting on Hardaway and as
Powell.
far as I know, waiting on Dwight Powell, right?
Yeah, Powell's questionable as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Dwight Powell piece is actually kind of big. If he starts, I expect that you're getting about 16 minutes for Powell and probably getting like 32 from Christian Wood, maybe 30. Christian Wood does have power forward eligibility now on DraftKings, which is nice. Looks like a pretty decent play if Powell is in, but you know, there is some risk there because you don't know exactly what the rotation is going to look like. But at 7,900 and 8% ownership, I do think Christian Wood looks pretty good. If Powell is out, though, I expect that you get Christian Wood in the starting lineup. He played about 38 minutes in regulation last game with Powell out. He would look very, very good if he's starting this game. Pretty appealing matchup for him, especially if Rudy Gobert is out. But Christian Wood's somebody that can space the floor a bit as well. So not
I was
somebody
going to
that
say, how much does it matter if Gobert is out with with Wood's ability to knock him down from long range?
Right. Yeah. He's not the kind of center where I'm really concerned about Rudy Gobert's rim protection because Christian Wood will just pull him out and knock down open threes. So yeah, like Christian Wood, I think assuming Powell is in, Christian Wood just looks like a high upside contrarian piece. If Powell is out and Wood is starting, I think he starts to move closer into very, very strong play territory. Luka is my favorite true pay up option if you can get there. I do just have him quite a bit higher than Giannis because of the playing time. And he's obviously just been fantastic this year. He's in a good matchup against Minnesota. Still though, you know, he's just so expensive on DraftKings in particular. He's a little bit less expensive on FanDuel. So I probably will get to a bit more there. Dinwiddie and Hardaway, if Hardaway is in, both project as, you know, you're basically 5X guys that you can take or leave. But Christian Wood and Luka, I think, are the top 2 guys from Dallas for me.
Yeah, Christian Wood's real interesting. Like, do you think if Powell is out, I know Powell's not going to play a ton of minutes anyway, but would Powell's absence open it up so you just feel that much more comfortable in Wood's minutes and starting?
Yeah, trying not to sneeze.
Just let it rip, man.
If Wood is starting, I would probably just go to like 36 minutes on him. Like I said, we got 38 last game, 43 including overtime. So if he's starting, it's just like they don't want to play JaVale McGee. You have Davis Bertans, but I don't think he's going to be, you know, I don't think Jason Kidd's in a hurry to give him minutes at the expense of Christian Wood. So I think that Wood's likely to play a ton if he's starting this game.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very, very intriguing spot against Minnesota. It's banged up for sure. With Minnesota, though, we're waiting on Rudy Gobert. I'm actually surprised that Naz Reid is probable for this one. You know, left yesterday's game with it was a trap injury. You don't see a trapezius, trapezius injury, right? Trapezius?
Reid?
Yeah. With Reid, yeah. I mean, it's shoulder, but they were saying it was a trap injury. Besides the point. And by the way, DeJounte Murray and John Collins are game time decisions. They said Collins was going to play, so now game time decision. But Naz Reid's probable for this one. I think there's a pretty good chance that Rudy Gobert doesn't play. And if that's the case, Naz Reid just becomes a very clear top value across the board.
Yeah, excellent point per minute guy. Should play a lot of minutes as well. Since the start of last season in games that Reid has started prior to yesterday, which obviously you can't read anything into, he had averaged about 28.5 minutes per game. In his start the other day in place of Gobert, you got like 36 minutes. I'd expect on average you're getting 30 to 32 from Reid. And he's just going to look very good. He's a 1.16 DraftKings point per minute guy. Happy to get to him. Wish he had power forward eligibility. That would make things a lot easier. But at 4,700, he's still just going to look great if you give him 30 plus minutes. If Gobert is in, Gobert is fine, but I don't think he really stands out. If Gobert is in, I don't love much of anything from this team. I think Gobert is fine in tournaments. I think Russell's fine. He does play more minutes without Jordan McLaughlin, which is nice. Anthony Edwards, we know he has a high ceiling. He's about a 1.2, 1.25 fantasy point per minute guy without Towns on the floor, but his price tag has come up as well. So no real priorities for me here if Gobert is in. If Gobert is out, again, Naz Reid becomes a very, very clear priority. And then also, if Gobert is out, it does potentially open things up for Anthony Edwards a little bit more, just because you don't have him clogging the paint. Edwards, 1.44 DraftKings points per minute on 59.8% true shooting without Towns or Gobert on the floor this season. When Gobert is out there and Towns is not, Edwards, just lost it. Edwards has averaged 1.1 DraftKings points per minute on 56.2% true shooting. So if Gobert is out, I do think it's a bump for Edwards as well.
Okay. Let's talk about San Antonio and Houston. We got 3 to go here. We'll make it. But anyway, 227 total, San Antonio 5-point dogs. Keldon Johnson, questionable, didn't participate in shoot around though. So that's an interesting little wrinkle on this game going into Houston. I said Keldon Johnson didn't participate in shoot around.
Yeah, I heard it just like a few seconds.
Process.
And one of the Spurs beat writers said that he doesn't expect him to play. Obviously, take that for what it's worth. He's still listed as questionable, but for now, I'm assuming that he isn't going to play since he missed shoot around, and we did get that update. And it makes Devin Vassell look a bit better. It makes Trey Jones look a bit better. Trey Jones, in particular, on FanDuel at just 6,300 looks good. But I like both of those guys on DraftKings. I'm interested to see what happens at the center position. And on the one hand, it's kind of nice because there are so many good center plays today that it shouldn't matter too much. But last game, we got Jakob Poeltl starting, but on a 20-minute limit. I went ahead and went 26 minutes for him here and 22 for Collins, which makes them both look decent, but not like any sort of a priority. But if you were to, again, get like Poeltl limited to 22 minutes or 24, and you're getting the rest for Collins, then he actually does look kind of interesting. But again, center's deep enough today, it probably shouldn't matter too much. Devin Vassell, Trey Jones, the priorities here. If Keita Bates-Diop is starting, him and Jeremy Sohan both project as decent point per dollar values in a good matchup. But again, they're pretty far down the board as far as guys that I care about getting to.
What's our likes ratio here? We got almost 2,400 people watching. 13.6%. All right. I mean, can we do 20%? There's got to be, out of 2,400 people, there's got to be 179 of you who can get us to that 500 mark. I think it's very doable, Adam. Very doable. Get to 500. Well, you know what? This is an opportunity for you to ask the people. They might take your word for it, since you, generally speaking, not someone that typically cares much about this type of stuff. I got to do all this.
Really? We're gonna waste it on one we already have.
You don't want to use? Okay. So, like, when would an opportune time to use it be?
I don't know, and I'm with one of the hosts that forgets to ask.
Okay. All right, we'll hold it back. We'll let the people do their thing now. We'll keep the trump card here for some other time.
You and Josh are not allowed to use my services to get likes.
That is fair. That is fair. That is fair. All right, atone for your sins then. Help us appease those YouTube overlords. We're gonna get the 500 easy, no question, no question. These guys will get it done.
Nurkic out. So we got Isaac Okoro starting, which was expected, but Nurkic also out now. So we should get Drew Eubanks starting, I would assume.
Okay. You like him?
Sure. He's 3,300.
Against OKC? Yeah. What are you doing with the other side of this game with the Houston Rockets?
So they look pretty good here. This is a very appealing game environment. Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Those three stand out as the top options here. Şengün pretty cheap at center, should give you 26 or 27 minutes. He's a 1.15 to 1.2 DraftKings point per minute guy. Green and Porter both should give you 34 to 35. Green just shy of a fantasy point per minute for the season. Porter at 1.07. They all three just look good at those prices. Then you kind of take a step back. You get Jabari Smith, who has been playing a bit more recently as he has started to play better. He's really, really struggled out of the gate in his rookie season, but seems to be, finally figuring it out. I gave him 31 minutes, but there are some games where you get 33, 34. Him and Eric Gordon, both not great options, but do project, well enough that they can land in a lineup here or there. But if you're only building a few lineups, I wouldn't think you're getting the Smith or Gordon. I do think any of Porter, Green, Şengün end up looking pretty interesting.
All right, well, here we go. Los Angeles Lakers. Let's make it happen here. This is where it gets wild. 10.5 point dogs, 229.5 point total. No Anthony Davis, no LeBron James. He was ruled out earlier today. No Austin Reeves. So now you're looking at a spot, and of course we're waiting on the Patrick Beverley news as well. But you're looking at a spot now where it's just wide open for the Lakers. We talked about Thomas Bryant. I don't actually think we need to get that much deeper into Bryant just for the sake of time here, since we got a 240 total game coming up next. We went real in depth in that earlier in the show. You can go back to that. It was like the second game we talked about. We got into the Thomas Bryant kind of game theory here. But Westbrook, Lonnie Walker, Dennis Schroeder, all of these guys popular for good reason. You're missing the two big dogs for the Lakers today.
Yeah, there should be a lot of ownership coming in here. Pretty appealing spot, and then obviously just taking both of those guys off the floor. Not sure what the starting lineup will look like. The last time both of these guys were out, you still had Russell Westbrook come off the bench. He played 28 minutes, but that was a game that blew out against the Raptors, so he probably would have played more. The starting lineup in that game was Dennis Schroeder, Lonnie Walker, Toscano Anderson, Austin Reeves, and Thomas Bryant. So I feel comfortable. Is out now too. What'd you say?
Reeves is out now too. You got 3 of 5 missing.
Right. So I feel comfortable that you're going to get Dennis Schroeder in there. We don't know the status of Patrick Beverley. If he is in, I expect that he will start, but he's questionable. Lonnie Walker should start. My guess is they keep Westbrook on the bench and they go with, if Beverly's out, they go with either Kendrick Nunn or Max Christie, and then they go with Troy Brown. I just think they want to keep Westbrook in that role with the second unit, but I do think he probably sees more minutes here and certainly sees better point per minute production. Without Davis or LeBron on the floor this year, 1.33 DraftKings points per minute for Westbrook. He looks like clearly one of the best options on the slate, even assuming that he does come off the bench, pulling 36% ownership, and I totally get it. We already talked about Thomas Bryant. He looks good. You do have Wenyen Gabriel back, so he becomes a little bit riskier, but at the same time, you're missing Davis and LeBron, and they have played Gabriel and Bryant next to each other a bit this season, so I think it's likely that you just see Gabriel soak up some of those minutes that are vacated by LeBron James, as opposed to taking minutes away from Thomas Bryant. $3,800 for Dennis Schroeder is going to look like a good value. 69 minutes this year without Davis or LeBron. 0.9 DraftKings points per minute for him. So I think he's going to look like a good value. Lonnie Walker, 0.8 DraftKings points per minute. He is also cheap at 4K. Troy Brown at 3,100, especially if he's starting, is going to look at least decent. Same goes for Beverly. Still not good point per minute guys, but they are cheap enough that I'd still want to take some shots there.
Phil Still, 19-month member. All right, with the free super chat. No AD or LeBron. Simple question he asked, Adam. Are Westbrook and Schroeder in the same lineup? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, this team is going to be popular, but like you said, for very good reason. What about Phoenix, though? I mean, not the same level, extent of injuries, but no Devin Booker, no Cameron Payne. I don't know if you consider Dwayne Washington a thing here, but Dwayne Washington out, Jock Landale out. This team's missing some players, too.
Yeah, so Chris Paul just looks better without Devin Booker and also without Cameron Payne. You mentioned that, but Payne's absence in general makes it so you can go from expecting around 32 minutes from Paul to expecting around 36, if not more. Then you take off Devin Booker. You have 136 minutes from Paul this year without Booker, 1.09 DraftKings points per minute. So Chris Paul is going to look like a good option at 8,100. He doesn't look quite as good now as he did earlier, just because Westbrook is cheaper and looks a little bit better, but he's still going to look good. DeAndre Ayton went through shoot around. He's averaged 1.24 DraftKings points per minute without Booker this season. He looks like another pretty solid option if he's able to go. Thomas Bryant, not exactly known for his defensive abilities. I think it sets up as a good spot for Ayton. If he were ruled out, though, you also don't have Jock Landale, so you should be getting a lot of minutes from Bismack Biyombo, who's about a fantasy point per minute guy for cheap if Ayton were to miss. But again, he did go through shoot-around.
Michael Applegate, free super chat. Can you fade Bryant if you're only playing 5 lineups?
You can fade anybody, but yeah, I mean, I think it's still, there's enough center options today that you absolutely can. He's a good play, but the answer is pretty much always going to be yes. And when you're talking about a center where there's, a bunch of other guys, I would say that yes, you can.
All right, you ready to wrap this one up? Charlotte and Sacramento?
Yep.
All right, I appreciate you guys. 550 likes, crushed it as always. It was never in doubt. So thank you for that in advance. Still waiting on Terry Rozier here. Dennis Smith Jr. questionable for this one as well. My assumption is that Dennis Smith Jr. will not be on the court. Dennis
Smith Jr. is out and Rozier's
out. Is he confirmed?
Yeah, the 531. Rozier's doubtful and Smith is out.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, second of a back-to-back, right?
Well, Rozier got hurt yesterday and Smith was already out.
Yeah. I know, I'm saying Smith I didn't expect to play. I didn't see the update. But okay. What are we doing with LaMelo?
Playing him. It's just pretty much a broken price tag on LaMelo. The one thing that does make the conversation interesting is that you do have Chris Paul in that price range. You do have Russell Westbrook, but LaMelo still just stands out as one of the best guard plays on this slate. I think he's pretty much this year been tracking to play 34 minutes a night when he avoids foul trouble. Last game, you actually got him up to 36 minutes. The foul trouble is a real risk. He fouls a lot for a guard, but he's just not priced to play 34 plus minutes. You're talking about like a 1.25 fantasy point per minute guy. So he looks really good. And, on top of that, it's a good matchup against Sacramento as well. Outside of that, I don't think there's a lot that stands out here. You do have Gordon Hayward at 6K coming off of a game where he played 34 minutes. So there's some merit in getting there. Kelly Oubre, I assume, is going to replace Terry Rozier in the starting lineup. He's likely to play 36 plus minutes, which makes him look okay. But I wouldn't call either of those guys a priority. More so just, a relatively contrarian piece you can slide in. I think LaMelo is the clear priority from this team.
Yeah, 8,400, dude. Like without Rozier. Yeah, you don't think he sees any limited minutes on the second of a back-to-back, right? I mean, I
don't think so. Wait, Hayward or LaMelo?
What's up?
Are you asking about Hayward or LaMelo?
LaMelo, because he's only been back for 3 games.
Yeah, I don't think he will. I'm not going to project Hayward like he does either, but I would be less surprised if we got kind of a shitty Hayward rotation than if we get a bad LaMelo one.
We'll wrap it up with Sacramento. Domantas Sabonis, center only, and if Rudy Gobert is out, I would assume that this ownership probably falls even more. But he's at 23% right now. Fox is pulling 20. And again, I mentioned this early in the show, but this game has a 241 total, Adam.
Yeah, I love Sabonis here, one way or the other, because like the way it looks right now, if you assume Gobert is in, then yeah, you're getting 23% ownership coming into Sabonis, but he's also just a really good option. He's been playing huge minutes recently, coming off of a game where he played about 41 minutes, 40 to 41. If he avoids foul trouble, he's just likely to play north of 36 minutes in a very appealing spot. And you can't really predict foul trouble, but a Mason Plumlee, PJ Washington front court isn't exactly one that I expect to increase the chances of him getting in foul trouble. So he just looks really good. If you're going to expect 36 plus minutes at 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in an above average spot, he's going to look really, really good. Similarly, you have De'Aaron Fox pulling 20% ownership. He's another guard in this like low 8K range that just looks really good. About 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. Also playing more recently. Now, keep in mind, last game, Davion Mitchell was out. So I do think that impacted, the fact that Fox played 39 minutes, but I still expect you're getting 34, 35 from him here, which makes him look good. Those two are the pieces I'm really interested in. If you were to get Gobert ruled out, that ownership on Sabonis comes down because it becomes a lot more difficult to get to him. But then you get the added upside of, if something happens to one of Reid or Bryant, who are both going to be massively popular, if they don't put up a really big score, you're just going to get a low-owned Domantas Sabonis passing all of those teams. So he'd still be really interesting to me in tournaments.
All right. What else do you want to hit on before we get out of here? We're over time. Sorry, yeah. Eric and Greg.
Not much of anything. We actually have Harrison Barnes pulling some ownership here. I get it. He's 5,500 and likely to play 32 to 34 minutes, but I think there's a lot of guys that look comparable to Barnes.
Hey, follow Adam at Ship My Money DFS, me at Lafayette_D. Shout out as always to Jordan Klein for producing this show. Until football's over, you won't see me back here till Monday, but a ton of NFL content. with these holiday schedules, Thursday night, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, all that shit. We'll be here, right here on the channel. And of course, tonight you got Neil and Matt breaking down live before lock for NFL. Greg and Eric coming up right now. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you back here soon. Good luck tonight. Yo, it's that time of week again, and it's a special time of week. It's the holiday season. We got Christmas upon us. Hanukkah's happening right now, and that means we're giving some stuff out, like some Stokastic Plus Platinum memberships, putting people up in the Hall of Fame here, and all you got to do to get involved is download the Stokastic profile picture at stokastic.com/avatar and tweet your wins at StokasticHOF on Twitter. You want to get a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum? You want to get inducted into the Hall of Fame? That's how we do it. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more, and boom, you're in. Let's get started on what we've got going for this week. Some big winners, starting it off with Clem822, Michael P. Clement, to be exact. Thank you, guys. Best tools in the industry. Special thanks to Player Q DFS and Draftaholic. Look at that. Top tying himself with $4,700 on each of them. Huge win for Michael. Next up, we're talking Trafalgar Law. It's easier to say Louis with the $15,000 win. One shot hit. Thank you to Josh and Eric for the Kessler pick and all the advice from everybody else. LFG, huge win, Louis. Congratulations with solo shot, just straight single bullets across the board. And D Fick with a $2,000 win. Thank you, Matt Kajeski and Stokastic, for my best college finish to date. Oh, and we got D Fick again. Always nice to solo bing a large field showdown. Player Q DFS has mapped out how to do it pretty nicely. He 100% has. Another $1,000 win for D Fick. Our boy News Guy, you've seen him in chat, you've seen him in Discord. Man's working every hour of the day. Shout out to Stokastic projected stats page. Turning a $10 bet into 466 using all of our projected props over there with OddsShopper and Stokastic. Keith Roberts, when that Russell Gage garbage time touchdown brings Christmas a week early. Shout out to the whole Stokastic crew for the tools and daily knowledge. Stop throwing your money away and go check them out. Damn right, Keith. $5,000 win. Merry Christmas, brother. And Jay Lusty with a $4,000 win. He's a simple man. At Stokastic is all he has to say. But we got $4,000 there. A little NBA action for Jay Lusty. And we're going to go with how do we do this one? Darek Barbour, I got one. Thanks. $1,000 in the $15,000 single back 3 entry. Congratulations, man. Next up, we got Andrew St. Clair. Yeah, buddy. $2,500. AT St. Clair over there on FanDuel with an NFL one. We had a nice Sunday, it looks like. And then you got, oh, this is the big one. S. Schaefer. Stokastic is fantastic. Took first and 6th. Thanks for providing the tools and the commentary to bring home the big win. Props to Greg Ehrenberg and Gundacker for the pre-slate show. Pre-lock breakdowns are essential to my process. Chalk up another one for the Stokastic Hall of Fame. $100,000 win. 6 figures for Schaefer. Huge win, man. Congratulations. Remember, download the Stokastic avatar at stokastic.com/avatar. Tweet your...
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Stokastic NBA Live Before Lock. Today, we are sponsored by No House Advantage. As you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is a Monday, so we're coming off the weekend and no rest for the weary as far as the NBA injury reports are concerned. We've had a lot of moving parts. Players that were out ruled in, SGA. We've got players still questionable, DeAndre Ayton, Rudy Gobert, Jeremy Grant, Keldon Johnson, OG Anunoby, DeJounte Murray. A lot going on in the injury report. Eric, how are you feeling about the slate, and how was your weekend? How was your day yesterday?
Oh, it was lovely. I loved waking up in the morning, tip to tip, just to start it off in the right fashion. My wife was in the room here on Saturday nights. We ended up going to a Christmas party or whatever, but I slept in here because I knew I had to get up at like 5:30, 6 a.m. Hit my alarms a couple times. It's like 6:30, 6:45, kind of was a little lazy as I got going in the morning. And I roll out of bed. I put on my laptop. I'm like, oh, I'll just see what's going on in the NFL show. And the very first still caption that I see is Spags holding Puppet Lindquist and touching him and doing weird things, pulling his pants down and making out with him and all of this shit. And then you were like, oh, you got to go back and rewind it. I was like, I don't know if I have time for the most disturbing show that I've ever seen in my entire life. That 20 minutes of content will never, ever be topped as long as Stokastic exists.
And it will live on the banner of my Twitter page for quite some time as well. If you guys want to see, if you guys go check out my Twitter, on the banner right at the top at Ehrenberg DFS, it is Spags undressing Puppet Lindquist while me laughing about as hard as I've ever laughed on a show before. And needless to say, the puppet is built exactly like you. They made it to a T. There are no design differences compared to you in real life. It is the most accurate portrayal of another human being I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh, it's just me. I'm just doing the thing. You like my voice? Oh, well, F you too. Oh, Melanie's going to take care of Eric, yada, yada. I was like, oh, this is absurd. That was not what I was expecting at 6:30, 6:45 a.m., but such is life. You don't always get what you want, Greg. You don't always get what you want.
But if you try real hard, you just might get what you need sometimes. And that for today is going to be, for today,
yes,
is going to be NBA injury news. That is going to be NBA injury news. And we did have some news that broke a little bit before we started, and it's going to be one that's somewhat important for the slate. Jusuf Nurkic will not be playing today for the Portland Trailblazers. And I kind of think that was a piece of news that throughout the day almost got lost in the shuffle of that game because so much of the focus was on SGA going from being listed as out to being in, which, by the way, I think that anytime SGA sits on the tail end of a back-to-back, we should assume he's playing the next day, even if he's listed as out. OKC just posts stale injury reports. They don't update. So
yeah, they don't care.
Just news to keep in mind. So we've got Nurkic now officially out for the Blazers and potentially more news because Jeremy Grant,
yes,
he is currently questionable. What are the potential value spots that we're looking at from this team now?
Yeah, I mean, that's gigantic news now, too, with Jeremy Grant, as if Nurkic being out. I think that obviously makes us all think Drew Eubanks. That's your 1v1 kind of a swap. He's going to make a lot of sense. But Trenton Wofford is going to look really, really good for me as well. Justice Winslow could look really, really good as well. Josh Hart now being probable, I think he's going to look really good for me, sub 6K. I have so much interest in SGA on the other side of this game because he got ruled in from the clouds, and sub 10K SGA seems like a lot of fun without Josh Giddey as you put his rates in. But that Portland side became very, very intriguing. I think Drew Eubanks, obviously, but I could like Watford. I could really like Josh Hart here in this spot. And then Winslow would be the one piece who I have none of right now that I would actually be getting to if we get Jeremy Grant out.
Yeah. So right now, the assumed start for me, at least anyway, I'm assuming Drew Eubanks is going to start.
Same.
And I have a decent projection on him. He's made 3 starts this year, averaged 28 minutes per game in those starts, 23 DraftKings points. Here's the problem though. There is so much other value at the center spot that even with me having a pretty decent projection on him, I'm not getting to him all that much right now, just because the opportunity cost is like Thomas Bryant is a center on DraftKings. You have to get exposure to Thomas Bryant today. So that's just one spot that's going to be taken up.
But you named one center. Who would be the other center that you just want to play tons of? Because I don't have another one that projects out like this. I mean, Thomas Bryant's pulling 67% ownership. We have Drew Eubanks at 0.1. That's going to change here throughout this show as we get closer to lock. He's going to be very popular. But, I mean, there's really nobody else that projects the same way. Pokashevsky has the power forward eligibility, which is useful. I like Jonas Valanciunas for tournaments, but he's low owned. For me, it's really not all that prohibitive to just play a lot of Drew Eubanks at this point in time. I don't think there's a lot of the other value, like the Lakers value has such positional eligibility everywhere, like the Lonnie Walkers, the Phoenix Suns. I think that's the one that I'm paying attention to the most. I think with Phoenix, if you don't have DeAndre Ayton out there, you don't have Jock Landale, I'm going to want to play a ton of Bismack Biyombo in the late night hammer. Like that's the only other cheap center that I have on my radar. And it might be something where I see how Drew Eubanks does in those allotments because he's 3,300. I'm getting right around 26 fantasy points. I'm assuming you have something very, very similar to that. I want to play a lot of him. So I really don't have a problem with it.
So here's what I have for guys that I'm playing at the center spot. Now, Thomas Bryant, my most rostered one by far. If you're choosing between Bryant, Eubanks, it is Thomas Bryant all day for me. Other centers I really like, players that are center eligible only, right? So Thomas Bryant, number one by a mile. And then here's the other guys that I kind of have mixed in for myself. Domantas Sabonis. He's somebody I really want to get exposure to. And somebody on DraftKings center eligible only. Sabonis, much easier to fit in on FanDuel, where he's the power forward and center eligibility. For DraftKings purposes, you can only play him at center. And I want to get exposure to Sabonis. He's been a monster, and I love this matchup. I like DeAndre Ayton a lot today. So DeAndre Ayton is another center I'm getting exposure to. I have him as in right now. There's a little bit of extra usage we could expect to go to him in the absence of Devin Booker. I don't think anybody's going to be playing him. And then also, if we do find out that Ayton is ruled out later in the day, I've got lots of flexibility. So lots of Suns exposure, lots of Lakers exposure. So I've got Ayton in for now. Those are two guys who I really want to get exposure to, along with Drew Eubanks. And with Thomas Bryant taking up the majority of my center spots, I have to get exposure to these other guys as well. And it makes it hard for me to be like, oh, well, Drew Eubanks pops up in 30 or 40% of lineups for me. It just isn't the case because the opportunity cost I'm leaving out on these other centers I like.
Okay. I understand completely. I heard the tail end of the last show with Adam where he was talking about Domantas Sabonis there and his interest level there. I obviously very much like Domantas Sabonis. I think he makes a lot of sense, the power forward eligibility, as he said on FanDuel. But I mean, even then, I really just like playing Giannis power forward. I like getting to Luka at the guard spot. You get some of these slates where you rotate around some of the other value that may be very, very sketchy. Like it's very, very sketchy from the OKC side that isn't SGA, especially with SGA being in now. I just like paying up for him. And then some of these other pieces are very, very volatile that, I mean, I don't know, maybe Pokusevski's bad chalk. I'm not sure, but I can play him at power forward. I can rotate a lot of these Portland pieces now that exist that may or may not have existed before. I don't find it all that difficult. And I'm saying this fully well that I just updated everything like 5 minutes ago. I understand we're going to get a lot. Oh, so now we say all the most terrible things.
Eric, put your clothes back on.
Oh, I'm so cold.
Yeah.
I'm nipping out. Oh,
all right,
no.
are we live?
Oh, okay. Never mind. Yeah, we're chill.
Back.
We're good.
All right. Cool.
Hi, everybody.
All right, good.
How are
all right,
you?
Good.
Yeah, great.
What ended up happening there? Who's to say? Who's to say? Yeah, I think we should blame it on Jordan. He's the producer. If there are tech issues, it's on him. It's certainly not on myself. It's certainly not on Eric.
I just said the most unbelievable piece of everybody needed to know. Drew Eubanks, Thomas Bryant, and Bismack Biyombo would be good plays. That was important, right?
Yeah, and then the other part were you rubbing your nipples and farted into your microphone? Nobody needs to hear that, but yeah. But
it is what it is, though. You get a little kinky with your friends on 3:18 on a nice little Monday afternoon.
All right, just looking through chat, and it looks like we are all good. By the way, if somebody left a super chat in the last minute, it absolutely got buried. So I'm just making sure that was not the case because we got a lot of messages about it. Kind of. All right, so there was no like RIP Joe Rogan. It's like watching one of the UFC stream things, but all right, we're good. All right, we're good. Everybody's back. So just to pick up the Suns news and what we're going to be doing with DeAndre Ayton, because for me, here's the reason I have him in right now. It's going to be easier to swap off of him and get to other pieces than I think it is to have Ayton out and then have to get to him afterwards, just the way the salary works out. And already so many of my most exposed players are coming from this game anyway. So it's going to be fairly easy for me to be able to swap off Ayton if he is ruled out. Whereas if he's ruled in, I just think it'd be really difficult to get to him at that point.
Yeah, I've given a thumbs up, your Schroeder, your Lonnie Walkers, your Thomas Bryant, it'd be impossible not to get to a lot of him, and Russell Westbrook. As long as I'm getting to a lot of them, Chris Paul on the other side of this one, you get to some Ayton. I have no problem. If you want to keep him in for now, that's no issue. It should be easy to be able to rotate around some of that. And you might as well get the game with over a 240 total there in the late night hammer that have some spend up options where you can use that money that would otherwise be going to Ayton. Sabonis, LaMelo Ball, De'Aaron Fox, I think they all make really, really good spend up options. So if you get quote unquote stuck with Ayton, I don't think it's that hard to be able to pivot out of it.
Yeah, and that is the game that I think by far warrants the most consideration because you got from the Lakers side of it.
Gobert
sorry,
out.
what was that? Oh, there we go. Gobert's out. So
Kyle Anderson questionable. What?
Gobert out. Kyle Anderson questionable. So unforeseen piece of news here. And once again, now more center value. More center. We need
the best piece of center value.
So now, by the way, I might end up rerunning lineups and really not getting to Eubanks now.
What in the absolute F? I thought Gobert was playing today. I was pretty sure he was playing. This is not good. This is very bad.
All right. So Naz Reid's salary.
Who had fun with 100% Naz Reid like me yesterday? Everybody? Good. Yeah, it was awful.
Right,
but
Naz
we're doing it again. This is going to get silly.
Naz Reid is $4,700 on DraftKings. The FanDuel price for Naz Reid is $6,000. Okay, so $6K on FanDuel. That's more or less an appropriate price tag, right?
Correct.
$6K Naz Reid on FanDuel. That's not.
Shout out FanDuel. They've been much more aggressive than normal. Like they've had some tighter slates, not just NBA, but NFL as well. I do appreciate FanDuel putting in any kind of effort to their product. So shout out them.
Yeah, at FanDuel, if you get some of Naz Reid at $6K, cool. You don't need to force him in now. DraftKings becomes a totally different story. So Naz Reid at $4,700. What are you going to be doing with him relative to Thomas Bryant, relative to Drew Eubanks, and the other center options that we have?
Well, I'm going to play a lot of him. I get it. You have on the other side of this one, Dallas, but you could also be getting Christian Wood starting at center, and that could be really, really fun just for the shootout potential of this game. I already like Luka. I think Christian Wood would be a guy I would want to play a lot. He has power forward eligibility, which is useful. But Naz Reid, I just got it. There we go. 37 fantasy points seems good at 4,700. I kind of like that.
Let's see. What do we got from him?
My God.
So he's made 2 starts this year, if I'm not mistaken. The one yesterday, obviously disaster. He gets hurt. And whatever the hell trapezius tightness is. But he wasn't playing particularly well before then either. And I'm not exactly sure when the injury happened. I know he got ruled out later in the game, but I guess he left earlier.
It happened before halftime because he didn't come out of the locker room for a while. I watched a little bit of it while I was doing other stuff. But
here's why we should feel good about his minutes, though. His start before then, he played 37 minutes against the Thunder.
Yeah.
As long as his trapezius muscles are feeling okay today, he's going to play big minutes.
Yeah, and he is a good fantasy producer. It goes back to that thing where I was lamenting when Rudy Gobert got hurt on that one slate, and the guy was just like, you should have never played Gobert anyway. That was a fish play. And it's like, I didn't play Gobert. It's the fact that a 5% Naz Reid on a 3-game slate is the nuts, and I have 0 of him. Like that's the thing with these backup centers is that they can generally really produce from a fantasy point per minute rate. And over the season, Naz Reid, confirmed, very good from a fantasy point per minute rate. 1.17 is the rate that I'm looking at right now. I have him in for a little bit less than that. Whenever they go from a bench role where you're playing 18, 20-minute spurts, and then you go to a starting role, I always remove a little bit off the top there in terms of fantasy point per minute projections. We've got him at Stokastic right around 1.13. I think that's great. But I throw that in. I get him for when I take those minutes, which you can do in Cruncher now too. So it makes it very, very easy. I just put him in for 33 minutes to be on the low end, and that gave me 37.39 fantasy points based on that rate that we have there. Said I have him for 37 fantasy points at 4,700. I'm going to probably have him more than any other center.
Him and Thomas Bryant, 1A, 1B for me. I'm getting
95% of both of them in a run I just did.
So per the conversation we had before about Drew Eubanks.
Well, F Bismack Biyombo, I can tell you that, because Torrey could play. It could be a blowout. I don't know. I think I'll still get to some DeAndre Ayton and some other things just because that game environment's ridiculous. If it somehow, by the grace of God himself, in the year of our Lord 2022 stays close, you want to probably have some of those guys in Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, but like, come on. Naz Reid and Thomas Bryant are just head and shoulders above the rest of this.
So rerunning lineups here, the immediate trickle down effect. Center pool becomes much slimmer. Guys like Sabonis and DeAndre Ayton that I wanted to get to before, they're unfortunately falling by the wayside. Just Thomas Bryant, Naz Reid, just guys that are really, really strong options. Other things also, I now have more ability to spend up at the guard spot. So somebody who I was not getting as much exposure to before that I am a bunch now, like James Harden, LaMelo Ball, I get to these guys more often. Giannis, I get a little bit more exposure to Giannis as well on DK because I have more salary to play with. Is there anything that you expect to see as some sort of trickle down effect now that we have all of the center value?
Yeah, I'm going to have an ungodly amount of Luka. That's generally what happens to my lineups when this kind of stuff happens, is that I end up getting to the highest scoring option on this slate, and that is by 4 fantasy points, Luka to me. I feel like we've been very, very good at projecting Luka throughout the season, and it's not too hard. I mean, he's a 1.7 fantasy point per minute guy. You simply put him in for 36 minutes a night, and then you get a massive 60-point projection on him almost every single time. Other places it looks like 57, 58. I mean, even that. I just want to get to Luka. It doesn't even matter. Like, his floor is still something that's not going to burn you. We have 2 center options sub 5K that I think are the 2 best plays on the entire slate. From a point per dollar aspect, we do have, if you want to throw some Eubanks in there at 3,300 too, be my guest, because now his ownership isn't going to get out of control in any way, shape, or form. I think this just opens up the entire board and the entire slate, but specifically makes it so you want to be getting to Giannis, you want to be getting to Luka.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what some of the ownership ends up being, because, Thomas Bryant is somebody who is by far the most popular play of the entire slate. That is still going to be the case, but he's going to come down in ownership. If you had to guess who ends up being more popular, Thomas Bryant or Naz Reid?
It's definitely going to still be Thomas Bryant. Like, definitely. That's part of the appeal of this entire situation. Naz Reid burned anybody who played NBA DFS yesterday. He's 4,700, so the tag's gone up a little bit. And there haven't been articles written about him today. There haven't been a million pieces. There haven't been sonnets sung about his name. Like, we're just, that Naz Reid is going to be somebody that doesn't have 65% ownership like he probably should have, even on this kind of a slate. I am pretty in love with getting to Naz Reid.
Yeah, and Jets World asked us, where do we rank Naz Reid if Gobert is out on DK? About as high as possible. One. All the way to the top.
Yep.
Miami High Life, with all the centers and point guards to play, rank your top 3 plays at each position for DK GPPs. Okay, so
not asking for much there.
The play, and I do have lineups rerun for all of the most recent news, subject to change in the next 33 minutes based on whatever ends up happening beyond this. But point guards that I'm getting the most exposure to, it is, for me, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, James Harden. Yourself, Eric?
Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder.
At shooting guard, James Harden, Lonnie Walker, Jalen Green is also up there for me.
Yep, James Harden, Lonnie Walker. And then I got to do something about this because I don't like Jalen Green all that much, but I'm going to be getting to him a lot at 7K, it looks like.
Small forward, Lonnie Walker also there, Paulo Banchero, and Mikal Bridges.
Small forward, right?
Yeah.
Jaden McDaniels now has just gone way up for me. He's at 4,400 today. Josh Okogie, Lonnie Walker.
Power forward, Banchero, Josh Okogie, and Giannis now. Giannis was somebody who a little bit hard to pay up for before, not the case anymore.
Yeah, Okogie, Giannis, and Pokashevsky. But the Pokashevsky, I can guarantee you, is going to come down as I finish this up.
And then at center, just 2, Thomas Bryant, Naz Reid.
Yep, done. Yeah, you're just playing a absolute metric F ton of them. You just are.
And now the other part of this equation too, and then we'll touch on some of these super chats that we've gotten. What would the impact be if Kyle Anderson doesn't play?
I mean, that's where the McDaniels thing, I just took Kyle Anderson out. And part of it is that they did bring Luka Garza back. He was just destroying the G League. I kind of got a little frisky. Nathan Knight still played above him, but didn't play all that much. As you said before, he played 11 minutes. Then he played 26 minutes in relief of Naz Reid yesterday. I think Naz Reid will be good to go here. It felt like they were just a little bit precautious with him, knowing that Gobert might be sitting here in this spot. But those are all 3 centers. I don't imagine that they're going to be sharing any kind of the floor together. That makes Jaden McDaniels like the only power forward that exists on this basketball team. Like, I think they might have to put Nathan Knight out there to play alongside Naz Reid a little bit. Like, that's a legitimate thing that exists here. Wendell Moore, definitely undersized. Anthony Edwards, undersized comparatively to any power forward you could have out there. It is useful that they're playing Dallas. You look at like what that matchup might look like. DFS isn't all that prohibitive to me, but Christian Wood, not your traditional center per se. JaVale McGee playing in spurts. I mean, it's just such a spot where you might see them play a lot of small ball by necessity, but like, I don't know what to do other than give Jaden McDaniels 38 minutes today.
Shout out to No House Advantage, the sponsor of our show today. And there's always overlay to be had at NHA. They've been launching some really big contests, trying to scale them up even greater as of late. And you guys should be taking advantage of it. And when you're signing up for the first time, use the link that we have below, or you're about to see it in the YouTube chat, because that is going to get you up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. But in addition to that, there's props you can play against the house over at NHA. We've got projections on that over at Stokastic as well. So go check out No House Advantage. And once again, use our link to sign up to get credited for that $50 bonus when you make your first deposit. We just got news that OG Anunoby is going to be playing today. John Collins listed available to play. Let's see, DeJounte Murray listed available to play. You take 15 seconds to do an ad read, Eric, and you come back and you just super chat, questions in Discord, news breaks in NBA. There's never a time to just sit down and take a breath. But what do you make of the Atlanta Hawks here with DeJounte Murray and John Collins both playing?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit off the top of Trey Young. I doubt he's somebody who shows up that prevalently for me anyway. I like James Harden more, even though he's not one of my top 3 highest owned at each position there. He's still a guy that I like at 9,900. I love Shea at 9,800 for a spend up option. And then Luka, I'm just getting to an absolute crazy amount of there, along with some of these other spots. I just don't see how Trey Young shows up in any kind of lineups for me now. I thought about DeJounte Murray simply because I like the tag, but I doubt he comes out of the gate and plays 35 minutes. Tough to get to him on a slate like this, where you have Luka, you have Giannis available to you, you have Joel Embiid if you want to try to get really, really weird at center, even though I assume that ownership's going to be very low now for Embiid, and we know the kind of upside that exists there. So when you have these 3 studs who all project north of 58 fantasy points on the same slate, very difficult to make way for a Trey Young, who's now going to have DeJounte Murray and John Collins back in the mix. I'm not going to project him over 50, and that's not going to make the cut for me today.
Super chat from our guy, Michael McKinney. His usual question, wants to know who the 5 must plays are for FanDuel cash games. So over at FanDuel, and by the way, this is something like Naz Reid on DraftKings, must play in cash games. Absolutely must play. For FanDuel, while I think you could make a consideration for Naz Reid, it's totally different at 6K. He's not somebody I would consider, a must play or anything in cash games. These are the guys I would consider, though. And one thing that's funny about Drew Eubanks is where on DraftKings he's hard to get to. FanDuel is power forward and center eligibility. Way easier to get to Drew Eubanks over at FanDuel. And he's somebody who's not impacting quite the same way as he is on DraftKings, where he's not getting pinched with the multi-position eligibility. So Drew Eubanks, LaMelo Ball, Domantas Sabonis, Chris Paul. Those are the 4 guys that I would say you have to play in FanDuel cash games.
And you have to play Naz Reid. I'm going to say at 6K. I project him for 37. I'm kind of putting that same thing in. I have him right around 36 fantasy points for FanDuel. I would play him at 6K over a 5,800 Thomas Bryant.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who. So I definitely think Eubanks and Sabonis are 2 of those power forward and center spots.
Totally. Yep. And then you play Naz Reid at center.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say must play, but I'm fine with him being in the top 5, one of the top 5 plays.
Okay.
So
he's the best center play over there still too at 6K. I like him more than Bryant for 200 more. There's less of a salary gap between the 2 of them there. Bismack is at 52. Kung was at 52. I mean, if you're not going to play Sabonis and Eubanks at one of the center spots, which I don't think you probably should, unless, because you can play Giannis at small forward. Yeah, I absolutely would play Naz Reid at center over there.
Malukar, Merry Christmas, Stokastic fam.
Hey.
Good luck to all, and $4 signs. I'll tell you, most of us in these parts, especially myself, are absolute pieces of garbage. Malukar, salt of the earth. That is a good human being. Malukar, we appreciate you.
Yeah, no, we're just absolute wrecks.
Yeah. Malukar, legitimately good human being.
Mm-hmm.
You don't belong hanging out with myself in here, but we appreciate you, and thank you for the nice message. Jorge wants to know thoughts on the rest of the OKC trash dudes. Are we sticking to SGA only today? I think that Pokusevski warrants some consideration. Not a high priority for me, but he's going to be in the mix. But, if you're building lineups 3-4 hours ago when you were assuming SGA was out at that point in time, you're getting to all of the OKC guys. So much other value has opened up. There's no priorities for me from OKC. SGA is my most rostered player from the team. Pokusevski second, but nothing's a smash or anything.
I have 3% Jalen Williams. That's my next highest owned. behind Pokashevsky and Shea. The important thing to make note of here, do not play Pokashevsky at center. You have to just change him on cruncher to power forward. I generally would be like, oh, you shouldn't think about stuff like that. You should absolutely not have Pokashevsky in any center spots, period. And sometimes when you crunch and you don't make that change, he'll still show up for you. I changed him to power forward, not something I traditionally do, but I want no shares of him in that spot.
Super chat from Michael Pizzulli. Good luck and happy holidays to everyone. Michael, thank you. We appreciate you. K2. I don't know why I said C. K2 Superman. How does PJ Washington look on FanDuel? So PJ Washington.
I have something to show you. Not good.
Out of 150 lineups, he popped up in 5 for me. PJ Washington.
I didn't crunch lineups, but I'm looking at it and I would not want to play him.
They're just better guys to get to. And once again, as all these other plays open up, players fall by the wayside. I don't know what it would have been for me pre-Drew Eubanks because I didn't run FanDuel lineups until after we got the Nurkic news. But he takes up a lot of those power forward spots, Drew Eubanks does, and that does leave somebody like PJ Washington kind of falling by the wayside. The other thing, too, when it comes to Washington, we've got Gordon Hayward back in the mix. LaMelo Ball is back for the Hornets. That's just usage that takes away from PJ Washington. So somebody that I don't really think is a very high priority play whatsoever. Super chat from H. Watford is a pivot with everyone going to Eubanks on FanDuel. Cheers, fellas. Merry Christmas, Eric, and Happy Hanukkah, Greg. How did he know?
How did he know? I am flabbergasted. He would put you in that box. Take him out of that box. How dare he? Happy Hanukkah, Greg.
This guy's observant.
Yeah.
This guy's observant.
Or he watches more than a show or two of us and just could overall tell. Or he's looked at you in your life.
Yeah, I just want to know what the top 8 giveaways were. Like what were in honor of Hanukkah? What were the top 8 giveaways?
Oh man.
So anyway, we get Watford as a potential pivot to Eubanks. Certainly, if Jeremy Grant is out, in addition to the absence of Nurkic, I think you can make a pretty strong case for Watford. As of right now, though, I just think Eubanks is good chalk on FanDuel.
Eubanks is very good chalk on FanDuel. Eubanks is good chalk on FanDuel. Naz Reid is my favorite tournament option and favorite everything option for FanDuel. Because again, 6K, I'm not sure how much people get there as opposed to Thomas Bryant. That news did come out 30 minutes before lock, and it seems like the FanDuel ownership has been a lot lower. I need to start playing on multiple sites again. I think that's what it comes down to, Greg. I got to stop just playing DK for all these other things that I do in my life. But I'm saying Naz Reid at 6K, still want to get there. Watford was the other guy that I kind of like impulse wanted to buy on. He's 3,900 over there. On FanDuel, you're less inclined to have to take those kind of shots. On DK, I really want to take shots on Trent and Watford in the event that those minutes go up, but I have no problem playing him and Eubanks in the same lineups. I imagine that there's still going to be scenarios where they're on the court together. Let me just go through a couple of these games where Nurkic has been out and double check that. But like, I have no problem getting to some Watford.
You know what's funny? On DraftKings, I actually get to more of Watford than Eubanks just because he's power forward eligibility. It's so hard to play Eubanks at this point as center only, whereas Watford has the power forward eligibility. Only 5% owned at the moment. Over on FanDuel, Eubanks, the most popular player on the slate right now, 60.3% projected ownership to him, whereas Watford only projected for 7%. So I would also say it kind of depends. If you're just playing one lineup, I would lean more towards Eubanks. If you're playing a bunch of lineups, I do think it makes sense to also have Watford worked in a little bit there over on FanDuel. So do you have something you want to add there, Eric?
No, not at all. No, good.
Okay. T. Lee wants to know, who are our favorite single entry plays today? Is there anybody you really like for single entry?
Well, let me kind of look at the ownerships here as they update. I just refreshed and it took away all of my power forward shifts that I had made on things. That made me very, very sad, but it'll be okay. I'm not as high on Banchero as what you are from what it sounds like. I get where you're coming from. Again, it's an Atlanta matchup that can be fruitful, and it just feels like with everybody there and Fultz playing better, and feels like the ceiling might not still be there. Sub 8K. Maybe I'm just completely wrong about it. I'm getting more to the Giannis and Luka Doncic's of the world, playing a lot of the cheap guys around him, but somebody that I'm just way higher on than the field. I mean, Shea's sub 20%. I think that's pretty good for single entry. When you start talking about Dennis Schroeder, when you start talking about Russell Westbrook, Luka Doncic, I think they're all going to get, well, Luka is going to come up here in the next run, I would assume, but for sure, Russell Westbrook and Dennis Schroeder are going to eat up a lot of those point guard spots. Why not trying to get to some more Shea or some of these high upside guys? Kevin Porter Jr., somebody that I like, that Houston, San Antonio spot, they're favorites, which you don't say every day about Houston. That's what happens when Keldon Johnson gets ruled out and is not playing basketball today. But I like getting to them as kind of more contrarian point guard options. And De'Aaron Fox in the late night hammer, as if you needed more opportunity to be able to swap around to more LAL and Phoenix stuff. I feel pretty good about De'Aaron Fox in this spot, considering a sub 8,500 tag.
So my favorite single entry play, I also like him a whole bunch in large field GPPs. I think James Harden's going a little bit overlooked, especially when you consider all of the value that's opened up. Tim Hardaway Jr. listed out.
Oh boy.
When you consider all the value that's opened up in the front court for us recently, there's just extra value. There's extra cap space that we have to use as far as backcourt players go. The field is mostly going towards Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul, which I understand why, but when we can now get James Harden at 10% ownership on DraftKings, on FanDuel, Harden is at 3% ownership. And he's not that expensive on either site. Sub 10K on DK, 10,400 on FanDuel. This is a guy who has a lot of upside that just isn't really picking up ownership. I get his last game was mediocre. He scored 47 fantasy points, which, by the way, is not an awful game, but just not a slate breaker. But his games before then, 63, 57, 57 and a half. This has been a really good fantasy producer this year, even alongside Joel Embiid. And there just is not really that much of the field going to him.
I don't mind that. Somebody was just saying, Damian Lillard, if Jeremy Grant gets ruled out. Damian Lillard has a 34.8% usage with Jeremy Grant off the floor. That seems pretty nifty, but you know what else? He has a 32.7% usage with him on the floor. I don't think it's going to be some crazy difference between the two. Excuse me, I need a drink of something. Here we go.
Oh my God, what is happening there? Oh my God.
Just dying. Don't mind me.
If that voodoo doll really works, I wonder what Spags is doing to that puppet.
Oh, this feels so good.
Yeah, something made you start choking. Have you recovered?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm good.
All right. So Tim Hardaway Jr. just getting rolled out. There are slates where that would matter. I don't think it matters today.
No. Well, it's interesting because I do think the usage, it's fractional, but it goes up a little bit there for young Luka playing alongside Tim Hardaway Jr. That was something I was paying attention to in terms of that upside. He has full reign. It's going to be Reggie Bullock minutes that are going to be filling some of that up. So that's never something that's ideal, but pretty good in terms of Luka's ceiling. Yet another reason that I'm going to get to a lot of him at the top, especially considering we only have him for 7.2% ownership at the moment, which is still kind of nuts to me, considering the revolving door of centers. I mean, there's a pretty good mid-range everywhere, but it just feels like it's pretty easy to punt in those two spots, find some upside everywhere else in your lineup.
Yeah. So, by the way, because people are asking, the ownership is running right now, and it's going to be posted in update very shortly. So I'm going to put that in. News God just updated there. So yeah, we're going to have an ownership update very, very shortly to see where Naz Reid comes in, and then we could discuss that. Some super chats to get to. My filler arc. Boncaro, Wood, or Grant on DraftKings. So I assume he means Jeremy Grant. We don't know if he's in. Christian Wood, Boncaro. That is Boncaro for me.
Still Boncaro for you. I'm probably, let me find that one. I just saw it come through. I like Wood in the event that that you get Powell ruled out. I think he would be the guy that I would want to get to. I think if Grant gets ruled in, I don't mind him against OKC. I would actually put Boncaro third, but I know that you're high on him, so I'm not going to besmirch him. I'll just go Christian Wood 1, Boncaro 2, Grant 3.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're not playing Boncaro,
I'm not really. I've got 4% of him.
Yeah, no, it's no. I will not be offended if you are not also playing.
Just saying, I respect your opinion, and you are very, very sharp at this, but I am not getting there. I don't know why. I'm just not.
All right, I'm gonna update my lineups now, and
I don't want to play this much Josh Okogie. What are we doing with this guy?
He's fine as a placeholder though, because I have exposure to him right now as well. But I'm going to end up. I assume once news comes out post lock, it's fine to just have him in as a placeholder and be able to swap off him.
Great point.
So I've no issue with that, with him being in lineups, and even him popping up in some lineups. It's not the end of the world with all the guys that are out for the Suns. Obviously, Devin Booker being the main one.
Correct.
Super chat that we have next is from. Okay, here it is. Devin Davis. 3 favorite sub 5K punts not named Naz Reid or Thomas Bryant.
Okay. Well, Jaden McDaniels is one of them for me. Josh Okogie is one for me. And let's go door number 3. I'll let you fill that in.
Sub 5K. So I'm sorting, looking through the players. Sub 5K. Dennis Schroeder. Did you say Dennis Schroeder?
I did say Dennis. Well, no, I didn't throw him in there. No, but I definitely have tons of him. So there you go.
Okay. So Dennis Schroeder, the answer then. Dennis Schroeder, pretty cheap on DraftKings, $3,800. And just, once again, a guy in a really good spot. Lakers today. There is no LeBron James. There's no Anthony Davis. Somebody other than Russell Westbrook is going to take a shot eventually. Some of those figure to be Dennis Schroeder. Next super chat that we have here is from Nate. Ceiling game for Dame. Chances OKC can score enough on the Blazers to warrant Dame time. The spread isn't that wide for this game, right? So the spread is at, this is actually one of the tight, this is the second tightest line game of the entire night.
That thing came crashing in. You got it at +7 this morning, I think is what it was when I did the video last night. It was like right in that ballpark. I was, 7. Of course, doing something else like a doofus, but +4. That's a huge shift. It's a completely different ball game here. No Nurkic, and you get SGA, the massive piece in there that shifted it by a couple points. I'm about that situation.
And that line goes to 3.5 or 3 if Jeremy Grant is ruled out as well. So just for reference on your question, Nate, Portland is a 4-point favorite. New Orleans, Milwaukee, New Orleans is a 1-point favorite. There's not a single other game that is a spread that's under 5 points. So if you're nervous to play this game because you think it could be a blowout, like what do you think of every other game on the slate that is a wider spread? So this game should be competitive. OKC is better than they are given credit for. People just came into here going, oh, this team is going to tank. SGA is too good for this team to just outright get destroyed in a lot of games. Obviously, any team can get blown out at any point in time. The most likely scenario is we get a competitive game here. What really hinges on Dame more for me than anything is, does Jeremy Grant play or not? Right now, I think he's a low priority spend up option. He becomes
Jeremy Grant will play Monday. How about that?
All right. So Lillard is somebody who just low priority play, not someone I'm going to be getting to very much. I would have liked Grant to be out to really get to Dame because that would have opened up extra usage for him.
Yes, sir. Okay. Well, that is crappy because I was going to get to some Watford and now I'm probably, I doubt I get to any now.
So here's some way that you guys can get access to all of the tools that we have over at Stokastic.com. A couple real cost-effective ways to get your foot in the door. First off, 3-day free trial. Anybody could afford free. All you have to do is click on the link we have below, and it's going to be thrown into YouTube chat. And using that link, and you're signing up for the first time over at Stokastic, 3 days for free. Check out everything we have behind the paywall, player projections, ownership projections, boom bust tool, our new lineup generator, all that. Everything included for every single sport. Also, though, if you guys don't have a BetMGM account, you could sign up at BetMGM right now. And when you use our link and make a $10 deposit, you're going to get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. So that is a couple of really cost-effective ways for you guys to get access to what we have behind the paywall and see if it's for you or not. And it's no risk, right? If you don't like it, it's okay. I won't be offended. Eric might be. I won't be, though. But this is
I'm always offended.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive, guys. I'm sensitive.
So check it out. If you guys want to sign up, either through a 3-day free trial, we have a link for that, or BetMGM, $10 deposit will get you 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Super chat from Ryan Langley. Thanks for the great info as always, guys. Thoughts on Vanderbilt on DK in the power forward spot with no Olenek? I was playing Vanderbilt a whole bunch at the start of the year. I have not played him in a minute, though. One of the things that has been pretty restrictive is Walker Kessler playing more minutes now and just being really good. And there's just so many good plays now that I find Vanderbilt difficult to get to. But are you singing a different tune when it comes to Vanderbilt?
No, and also you can just see in his minutes, they're getting jerked around in a very strange fashion where it's hard to know what you're going to get. coming off of that game against the Pelicans, he looked really, really good. Just played 23 minutes. There was a blowout there. I ended up going back to the well on some rebound props, and I got a little burned by that, going to that back-to-back. Same situation, same matchup. They had it competitive that time, and he only played 21 minutes. He's now only played 21 minutes back-to-back games. He can pop off if he plays 30 minutes for 15 rebounds. That's something that's well within the range of outcomes with a 20% rebound rate, basically, for Jared Vanderbilt. But I just don't trust the minutes because, as you said, Walker Kessler has just been flat out good. It's a guy that I thought, I thought with Olynyk that was going to be something that mattered, and I ended up getting there. But I don't really see myself getting to anything from that front court. And that includes Lauri Markkanen here in this spot. Revenge narrative for his 1 year in Cleveland or whatever. Like, have that, enjoy that. But for all intents and purposes, I don't see how you land on anybody from the Utah Jazz today.
Yeah, not priorities there. Basically focusing on the teams that have really good players are out. Kelly Olynyk, good. Not really good, though. So he's not one of those guys where there's a massive void to fill. Michael Pizzulli, super chat. Hey, guys. Kenrich and Shamet gaining ownership on FanDuel. How do you guys feel, especially if starting? So let's address Shamet first, because I think that it's more or less warranted. There's no Devin Booker. He's going to start. He's going to play a good amount of minutes, and he's really cheap. So there aren't that many guys sub 4K that I really, really do like to get to on FanDuel that are sub 4K. Shamet does fit the bill there. I have no issue with Shamet being mid 20% owned. How do you feel about Landry Shamet?
Yeah, I like him a lot, mainly because you also run in this spot. Damian Lee, he's been buried a little bit in the rotation outside of a game-winning start to the season where Steph Curry was running around his house on Instagram. Hasn't really done a whole hell of a lot. He's had a couple of games where he got into the mid-20s minutes, but the big piece of news is Cameron Payne being out here as well. I think it opens up a lot of opportunity. And Okogie coming in with a lot of ownership, Shamet coming in with a lot of ownership. I think it's very, very warranted.
And then as far as Kenrich Williams, it is difficult to trust any cheap guys from OKC. The starting lineup in the first half is not usually the same as the starting lineup in the second half. SGA is always guaranteed to play a big role. He's projected for 20% ownership right now. A little much for me for Kenrich Williams. I understand why there's upside if he is the guy, but it's always hard to know who the cheap guy is going to be from OKC because it is an ever revolving door as far as the rotations go. But do you have any kind of real confidence in Kenrich Williams?
No, zero. I have nothing. I have no confidence in anything that the Pelicans do that isn't named SGA.
Race Fan 22 wants to know Wood or Boncaro on DK. As of right now, that is Boncaro for me. If Dwight Powell was to get ruled out, then I would feel better about Christian Wood there. But as things stand right now, it's Boncaro.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still not on the Boncaro's train, so I'm not going to say I am.
Yeah, let's get more Boncaro.
And I like Boncaro as a player. I just, for whatever reason, I can't get to him today. Josh Hart available to play. That matters too.
But I think it's funny from a standpoint of we've gotten a bunch of Boncaro questions, and for me, it's a yay, and for you, it's a nay. But they keep coming in.
We haven't had a ton of that lately, which is kind of weird. We've had a little bit more groupthink, probably more groupthink than we should have at times. I definitely think that this is a good thing to finally find some discourse where, you change somebody by a couple minutes or you change it by a little bit of a fantasy point per minute rate. For me, I have Fultz projected out pretty darn well. Kessler is starting today. There we go.
Well, we knew Kessler was starting, but Vanderbilt's starting also.
Yeah. But I just wasn't positive. I know Olynyk, I would assume Kessler was going to be starting because there was no Olynyk, but just wanted to double check because I was still getting 2% of him.
The next question that we have is from Teddy Wayman. Teddy saying, I'm overindulging in wine in hopes that Donovan doesn't absolutely destroy Utah tonight. Good luck to you all. No question, just wants us to know he's drinking and a little bit nervous about Donovan Mitchell's return to Utah, who apparently, based on articles, said he did not really enjoy his time in Utah all that much.
Well, Super chat. Him and Gobert could not have hated each other more. That was pretty apparent.
No. They liked each other.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't like the city. Actually, Donovan Mitchell went to the front office at the end of last year and requested they don't trade Rudy Gobert. He really wanted them to keep playing together.
Oh, look at that. Yeah. See, these are the things I don't know.
Yeah, he didn't really like the city of Utah, though. Morphatrix. Thanks for the content as always, fellas. Last piece, shooting guard on FanDuel, $6,300 or lower. So let me look at FanDuel, shooting guard, $6,300 or lower. Sort by projections. 63. D'Anthony Melton.
6,300 at shooting guard?
Yes.
Okay. I am going with Franz Wagner.
I don't have an issue with that either. Franz Wagner. No, he's 7,100.
I'm looking at DK. Did he say
Yeah.
FanDuel? Yeah, see, I'm a dick. It's definitely Melton then. There you go.
Yeah, I was like, boy, Wagner would be a good option. Like, how come he didn't pop up when I was sorting this? Like, oh, because he's different
site. Don't do two things at once, kids. Don't do two things at once. Also, Jalen McDaniels, I'm getting to just an ungodly amount of this human being.
And you're assuming, by the way, that Kyle Anderson is out right now, right?
I am.
How would that change for you if Anderson plays then?
Then I just go to every piece that's already popular from the Lakers and Phoenix spot like an absolute donkey fish.
Okay. The next question we have, I think there was some in the Discord channel to answer. That covers all the super chats, just making sure that we had gotten to all of those. And then in Discord, T. Lee, top exposures after all the news. Nothing's changed for me since the last time we read it off because
Devin Vassal's changed for me. I want to give a special shout out to him. We got 4 minutes left. I know that we have to go out for the NFL show, but Devin Vassal, 7,100. Keldon Johnson, we got news that he was out, and I was trying to figure out what was really changing in terms of the projection over there. I wanted to get to something there. I figured him or Keita Bates-Diop might make a pretty good punt plays. Keita Bates-Diop at the punt spot. Devin Vassal, obviously more of a spend up at the mid-range, but shooting guard, small forward eligibility in that mid-range pairs nicely with you getting to a little bit less Luka than I was before as he started popping up for me. Who else is going to be scoring for this basketball team? Probably nobody, but it's a Houston matchup. They have over 111 total. I imagine it's got to be primarily Devin Vassal who does that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. He's not going to be one of my most rostered players, but I think that he definitely is at least sensible. Same goes for Trey Jones. Trey Jones, I think also warrants a little bit of a projection bump, but nothing that's going to really be a priority. Is he going to be a priority for you, Vassal?
I had 22%. That's a lot more than I was expecting. I had probably around 0. And I don't know why, because I assumed Keldon Johnson was going to be out all day. It was just something that must have slipped through the cracks thinking, oh, nothing's going to be all that important. And then we updated the rates and hello, Devin Vassal, 37 fantasy points at 7,100 looks pretty good.
Now, the other questions that we have here in the Discord from Swaz. Can you rank the chalky centers? Reid, Bryant, Eubanks on DK in the same order you listed them. Reid 1, Bryant 2, Eubanks 3.
Samesies.
Next question is from Jets World. Playing a single bullet in the 888. Will you please rank SGA, Melo, Westbrook, and Schroeder on DK? All are point guard eligible only. Okay, so a lot of these guys are in different price ranges.
They're all popular and they're all.
But
really
in
good.
terms of exposure, I'm getting to them. Westbrook 1, LaMelo 2, Dennis Schroeder 3, SGA 4.
SGA 4th out of that. That's why I'm with you. I think it makes sense. I feel like, God, I have no Fultz anymore, and I had all the Fultz before. Yeah, Westbrook 1, Schroeder 2, SGA. SGA would be 4th out of that grouping for me too.
Yeah, and it's not because I dislike SGA for the slate. Those are a lot of the best plays on the slate you listed there, and I think those other guys just warrant more consideration than him. And all right, I think we are all caught up now on the questions we have in Discord, all caught up on the super chats. How are you doing on your lineups? Any issues there?
No, thank God. I don't need that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
All right, nice. I'm pressing the upload button with the final version here. Is there anything you ended up getting to that you weren't really expecting or anything that we didn't talk about?
Nope. 93% Naz Reid, my highest owned player on the slate. Still have a ton of placeholder. Lonnie Walker, Russell Westbrook, Thomas Bryant, getting all of those late games, and I'll adjust to the starting lineup. Shouldn't have any problem getting to some exposure in the event that we get DeAndre Ayton in or out. I should be able to get to either one, either him or Biyombo if I want to.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Don't go anywhere. Well, in terms of leaving the YouTube channel, because we got the NFL Live Before Lock show. You guys are going to want to check that out. But the NBA show is coming to a close. So before you guys do close out of this window, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, go check out NFL Live Before Lock, and good luck tonight.
I had what is this?